Chapter 19. Chitley sized up this simple and crude building with a slightly envious gaze. He knew that the income of the mercenaries here wasn't high, a few thousand gold coins a month was a common matter. However, he also knew that the money here wasn't so easy to obtain. Stepping into the door, an old beggar suddenly rushed out from the side. "Please, sir. I used to be a mercenary too, until I took an arrow to the knee." Gerald waved his hand impatiently and walked straight in. The old beggar did not pester him and returned to his seat, continuing to wait for the next patron. "Father, are we really going to post a mission here?" Chitley asked, puzzled. At the same time, he frowned. He was not used to the turbid air here. Gerald nodded expressionlessly. At this time, he was not in the mood to talk to him. He walked to the front of the counter and a waiter dressed in blue came out to greet him. "Sir, what service do you need?" "I want to post a mission," Gerald said. "Okay, please wait a moment." The waiter nodded. He took out a book and wrote something on it. At the same time, he said without raising his head, "Go ahead." Gerald took a deep breath. "I want to kill a person. It's a child of about 15 years old. How strong is the target?" The waiter asked. "Strength, I'm not sure." Gerald hesitated. "But he practices necromancy." "Necromancy?" The waiter raised his head in surprise. Practicing necromancy in the Holy Roman Empire was definitely tired of living. He did not expect someone to be so stupid. Even if he wanted to practice necromancy, he should have gone to the Roland Empire or other places. What was even more stupid was that the person who posted the mission did not go to the Holy See. Instead, he came to the mercenary tavern to post the mission. It was the first time that the waiter had accepted such a mission. With the lesson from last time, Gerald did not dare to go to the Aryan priest. He could only go to the mercenary guild to post the mission. Killing a necromancer isn't that difficult. It's just like killing an ordinary person. The attendant muttered to himself. He was evaluating the value of this mission so that it would be easier for him to give out the reward. Attendants had the authority to evaluate these low-level missions on their own. "Sir, according to my evaluation and calculation, this mission belongs to level E. You'll need to pay 1,000 gold coins for this mission, plus a 5% handling fee. That's a total of 1,050 gold coins." The attendant said to Gerald after calculating. 1050 gold coins. To be honest, Gerald felt a bit of heartache. He didn't expect the mercenary union's fees to be so expensive. However, he already had a plan in mind. He took out 1,050 gold coins from his chest. "Sir, please take out the mercenary badge issued by the Mercenary Guild to register," the attendant said. The mercenary badge was a badge that was registered and confirmed by the mercenary union. It also represented the qualification of a mercenary. With it, one could better accept missions. Gerald froze for a moment. "Mercenary badge, I don't have it." "Oh, so that's how it is." "Sir, it doesn't matter if you don't have a mercenary badge, but the price has changed." The attendant was still polite as he said, "According to the rules of the mercenary union, non-mercenaries will need to pay double the fee. The handling fee is 20%, according to my recalculation of pornographic novels. Sir, you'll need to pay 2,400 gold coins." The attendant quickly calculated and said, "What, so expensive?" Gerald was stunned when he heard the attendant's price. "Yes, I'm sorry, sir. This is the rule of our mercenary union." The attendant was still smiling. Then how can I become a mercenary?" Chitley was speechless. 2,400 gold coins was equivalent to half a year's income of Manor Naka. "It's very simple. As long as you complete 3 level E missions, or a level D mission, the mercenary union will confirm that you can become a mercenary and issue a mercenary badge," the attendant said with a smile. "What's the use of this? If I had the time, they would have already killed me." Gerald cursed in his heart, but he had no way to deal with the rules of the mercenary union. Of course, this was the overbearing clause of the mercenary union. If everyone issued missions regardless of the cost, it was estimated that no one would do missions. Gerald walked out of the mission hall dejectedly. 2,400 gold coins was something he couldn't take out right now. Father, what should we do now? Chitley seemed to only know how to ask this one question. Gerald replied in a bad mood, You ask me, but who should I ask? At this time, his eyes saw a mercenary who was drinking. He frowned and a plan came to his mind. Gerald knew that in addition to issuing official missions in the mercenary tavern, temporary missions could also be issued. The so-called temporary missions referred to missions that were not recognized by the mercenary union and were privately negotiated between the employer and the mercenary. In other words, it was a private job. This kind of mission only required a commission and did not require a handling fee. Not all mercenaries were willing to accept this temporary mission because this kind of mission was not protected by the mercenary union. There was no guarantee. Not only did the employer not trust the mercenary, but the mercenary also did not trust the employer. Hey, hello. Gerald walked out of the hall and came to the tavern. He walked to the side of a rough-looking man and greeted him. That guy was leisurely drinking yellow wine, while his eyes were constantly glancing at the tall bulletin board on the wall, for fear of missing a mission suitable for himself. Who are you? I don't know you. The rough-looking man raised his pair of drunken eyes and opened his mouth to burp. Gerard couldn't help but frown when he smelled the stench. However, he remained courteous and praised the man for a while. What a handsome and brave mercenary! It seems that your strength is very amazing. Of course, my strength is already at the beginner. Hey, beginner swordsman. The man was drunk. I'm not afraid to tell you that I have completed a D-level mission, haha, really amazing. Gerald was overjoyed when he heard this. The strength of a beginner swordsman should be enough to kill a child. This brave warrior, I have a temporary mission on hand. I don't know if you are interested? Gerald took the opportunity to ask. Mission? What temporary mission? The man sobered up by half. Yes, temporary mission. But you can rest assured that I will definitely pay you on time, Gerald said with a smile. The man shook his head like a rattledrum. Not accepting, not accepting. If it's not an official mission, I won't accept. Hey, I thought it was something good. After saying that, the man went back to drinking, ignoring Gerard. Gerald had no choice but to turn to the others. Unfortunately, after asking several people in a row, they all refused after hearing that it was a temporary mission. They were not even interested in the mission's content. Gerald could not help but feel discouraged. It seemed that the identity of a mercenary was sometimes useful. Father, it seems that no one will accept our temporary mission. Let's go back, Chitley said softly. Gerald nodded and turned to leave. At this moment, a clear voice was heard. Excuse me, are you the one issuing the temporary mission? Gellet and Keatley raised their heads simultaneously, and were struck dumb for a moment. Appearing in front of them was an extremely beautiful woman. She was tall and had a curvy figure. Her black curly hair was casually draped over her shoulders. Her delicate facial features seemed to be embedded in her fair and pretty face. She was wearing a woman's light armor that wrapped around her delicate chest, revealing her graceful curves. Her black deerskin boots revealed her snow-white thighs. Her dark brown eyes quietly stared at them. She was like a beautiful rose among the group of rude mercenaries. Gerald and Chitley were stunned. They lived in a small place like Maple Leaf Town and had never seen such a beautiful woman. Looking at their lecherous gazes, the woman frowned in displeasure, but still asked politely, "Excuse me, sir, are you the one issuing the temporary mission?" Yes. Yes. Gerald was the first to react and replied. Chitley was still in a daze, saliva dripping from the corner of his mouth. "Excuse me, what kind of mission is this?" The woman asked softly. It's like this." Gerald came back to his senses. This is a killing mission. Is it to kill a person? Who is the target? The woman's beautiful eyes turned and asked. The target is a 15-year-old child. His name is Ron. Right, he practices necromancy. Geralt answered honestly. Necromancy. The woman frowned again, revealing a thoughtful expression. This is the Holy Roman Empire. Why don't you go to the Holy See? It's not very convenient. Geralt became firm at this time, thinking that he was the one issuing the mission. He paused and said, Just tell me if you want to do it or not. I'll say it first, this is a temporary mission. How much is it? The woman hesitated and asked. 500 gold coins. Geralt reduced the price by half. That's too little. The woman shook her head. Even a D-rank mission requires 1,000 gold coins. How about this? I'll accept the mission for 1,000 gold coins, but I won't help you kill anyone. I'll only be responsible for bringing the child back. 1,000 gold coins. Geralt thought for a moment and said decisively. Deal. The woman smiled, revealing her white teeth. She stretched out a small white hand. According to the rules of our mercenary profession, a temporary mission requires a deposit of half of the money, which is 500 gold coins. Geralt also knew this rule, but when it came to paying the money, there was always a trace of hesitation. He asked, Should I trust you? The woman smiled again. I'm a student of the Roland Empire's Balarax Academy. My name is Shea. Silver-winged Pegasus Knight Shea. I have the strength of a senior knight. As for whether you trust me or not, it's up to you. Before Geralt could speak, Chitley beside him shouted, Father, you should trust this sister. She's so beautiful, she definitely won't lie to us. Chitley's perverted appearance was already fully revealed. Shea glared at him with some disgust. Chitley's lustful gaze made her extremely uncomfortable. All right. Geralt sighed. I've heard of the Roland Empire's Balarax Academy. You look like a trustworthy person. I'll leave this temporary mission to you. Chapter 20. Is this the child? Shea glanced at it and nodded. At the same time, she also asked about Ron's background and identity. Knowing that he was just a vagrant without any foundation, she was relieved. Shea put away the portrait and said, 3 days. Give me 3 days, and I will bring this child to your place. The Naka Manor in Maple Leaf Town, right? Geralt nodded. Very good. Then, Mr. Geralt, goodbye. Shea performed a standard knight salute and turned to leave. Behind her, Chitley was still staring at Shea's back in a daze. Shea, you're back? What took you so long? Shea returned to her table. There were already several people sitting there. They were all students of the Balarax Academy. One of the boys stood up and asked politely. He was Shea's pursuer. Nothing, I just received a temporary task. Shea was obviously not interested in him, and said lightly. Temporary task? A girl at the table exclaimed in surprise, Sister Shea, this thing is not guaranteed. Shea smiled. It doesn't matter, Kadena. That guy's strength is only at the probationary level. He won't dare to play any tricks with me. I see. The girl named Kadena nodded gently. Like Shea, she was not inferior to Shea in terms of beauty. She was even more beautiful than him. She had long blue hair, and her fair skin exuded a delicate cyan color. Her long eyelashes covered a pair of big eyes that could speak. They twinkled, making her look as cute as a doll. She was wearing a blue magic robe and sat there demurely, like an orchid in a deserted valley. Shea and Kadena were known as the two school beauties of the Balarax Academy. Not only that, but their strength was more dazzling than their appearance. Kadena was 18 and Shea was 19. Both of them had already reached the top of their profession. At their age, they were the top contenders in the Balarax Academy. Unlike Shea, who was a commoner, Kadena had an illustrious identity. She was the little princess of the Doro Empire in the western part of the Roland Empire. Because she usually liked to wear blue clothes, some people called her the blue-clothed princess. Kadena and Shea, although their identities were very different, it did not prevent them from becoming best friends. One was a knight, the other a magician. Their professions complemented each other very well, and they also lived in the same dormitory. There were a total of 7 students from the Balarax Academy, 4 men and 3 women. They formed a mercenary squad for a mission. Each of them was an elite of the Balarax Academy. They were all high-ranked warriors, none of them lower than a high-ranked warrior. Among the 7 people, the leader was a burly man. This man had a terrible scar from the corner of his eye to his mouth. When he spoke, the scar wriggled like a snake, making people shudder. The paladin, Mocklin, was 25 years old. He was the number 1 genius in the Balarax Academy. It was said that he was half a step away from becoming a master. Like Shea, Mocklin was also born poor. He climbed up step by step with his own efforts and talent. At such a young age, he had received invitations from many countries and forces. The most important one was the Holy See. As soon as he graduated, he would definitely be able to join the Knights Templar, the core power of the Holy See. However, Mocklin was still considering. The second was the priest, Sereno. He was born in a noble family. He had long blonde hair and looked like a girl. He wore a pure white priest's robe. Unlike Mocklin, he had joined the Holy See long ago. The third was the swordsman, Ifat. He was Shea's pursuer, but Shea obviously had no interest in him. There was also a thief and an archer, a man and a woman. They were already a couple. Mocklin was the leader of this group. He was also Shea's sweetheart. Unfortunately, Mocklin liked the blue-clothed princess, Kadena, but Kadena didn't like him. These people formed an elite squad and came to the Holy Roman Empire. They had just completed a C-rank mission and received a generous reward. Just as they were about to return to the mercenary station, they learned that Shea had received a temporary mission. Shea, why did you accept a temporary mission at this juncture? Don't you know that we are going back? Mocklin's hoarse voice sounded. He was a little dissatisfied with Shea. I'm sorry. I need money urgently, so... Shea lowered her head and blushed. She didn't dare to refute the leader's accusation. Don't you have any sense of teamwork? Mocklin raised his voice. His gaze became stern. The scar on his face trembled. It was scary. I thought that since you accepted this temporary mission, you would definitely finish it before leaving. Do you think we are waiting for you? Or should I wait for you? You don't have to wait for me. You guys go back first. I will go back by myself. Under Mocklin's stern gaze, Shea finally couldn't take it anymore. She lay on the table and cried. Kadena reached out and patted Shea's shoulder. She couldn't help but comfort her. She looked at Mocklin with a hint of blame. Mocklin, you are bullying Sister Shea again. Mocklin's gaze softened. He didn't dare to look at Kadena. At this moment, the swordsman Ifat stood up and slammed the table. Mocklin, you've gone too far. It's only been 3 days and you can't even wait. Fine, I know you're strong, but I, Ifat, am not afraid of you. Come, let's duel if you have the guts. Ifat, I know you like Shea. But she violated the team's discipline and should be blamed. I am not wrong to do this. Mocklin sneered and pointed at Ifat's nose. As for a duel, you are still not my match. Go back and train for a few more years. Ifat's face was red with anger. He didn't want to lose face in front of his sweetheart. He drew his sword. Then I will show you my power. The atmosphere was a little stiff. Mocklin was silent for a moment. He ignored the sword in front of him and smiled. Ifat, you must know that this is the mercenary station. You can't fight. Don't worry, if you want a duel, wait until I return to the Balarax Academy. I will definitely fight you to my heart's content. It was a rule of the mercenary guild that fighting was not allowed in the mercenary station. If you wanted to fight, you had to go outside. You were not allowed to destroy anything in the mercenary station. Otherwise, the guild would revoke your mercenary qualifications. Ifit's face turned red and white. He snorted, put away his sword, and sat down. At this moment, Kadena frowned and pulled Shea. Sister Shea, why did you accept this temporary mission? Shea stopped crying and raised his head to look at Franklin. He lowered his head silently and said embarrassedly, I want to buy a lower gold knight sword, but I'm still short of 1,000 gold coins. I think, after accepting this mission, I'll be able to buy it. Kadena smiled sweetly. Sister Shea, isn't it just 1,000 gold coins? Just take it as me lending it to you. Kadena knew Shea's personality. It was fine if she said she would lend it to her, but if she said she would give it to her, she would never accept it. Although Shea was born a commoner, he had never asked Kadena for money since they were friends. Kadena knew that if she forced it on him, she was afraid that Shea would turn hostile, and at that time, they wouldn't be friends anymore. Shea was a girl with a strong sense of self-esteem. Isn't it just 1,000 gold coins? Shea, I'll pay for it. Ifit's family wasn't bad. Although they weren't nobles, they were still wealthy. Ifit was very straightforward. He was pursuing Shea. Although 1,000 gold coins was a lot, he could still afford it. No. I don't want your money. Shea shook her head stubbornly. Kadena bit her lips and pleaded, Captain Mocklin, I think we should wait a few days. A few days won't be a problem. Seeing that Kadena was pleading, Mocklin could only nod. He then asked, Shea, what kind of mission is it? Do you need our help? No need. Shea heaved a sigh of relief and cast a grateful look at Kadena. It's just a small mission. It's to catch a 15-year-old child. He practices undead magic. Someone offered 1,000 gold coins for me to catch him. The mission is very simple. As long as we find the person, the mission is completed. Shea smiled at him and said, Undead magic? That undead magic that's called trash? Mocklin frowned in disgust. Such a mission isn't difficult at all. As you said, as long as we find the person, the mission is completed. He nodded. All right, go ahead. Finish the mission as soon as possible and we'll return to the academy. 2 days later, on the road from Gold's Higher Town to Barat City, Ron's figure appeared. Ron, where are you going now? Homeland's soul in the Soul Ring asked Ron after he left Maple Leaf Town. I don't know. Ron was in a bad mood. He tightened the package on his body, which contained the rations that Aunt Susan had given him. Thinking of Aunt Susan, a trace of warmth emerged in his heart. Aunt Susan said that she wanted me to leave the Holy Roman Empire and go to the Roland Empire. It's the world of magic and is known as the Magic Kingdom. Over there, undead magic won't be looked down upon and won't be hunted down. Magic Kingdom. Homelin was fascinated. In his era, undead magic was rampant. At that time, undead magic was like a toddler learning how to walk, but undead magic was already a thriving adult. I wonder how far magic has developed now? Homelin thought for a while and said, Ron, you're now a novice undead magic apprentice. If you meet an ordinary person, you'll be able to protect yourself. But if you meet a strong person, you won't have any power at all. I know. Ron lowered his head and sighed. But he raised his head again, his eyes flashing with determination. But, without revenge, I won't easily leave the Holy Roman Empire. At this moment, a horse's neigh suddenly came from the sky. Then, a black shadow swept over Ron's head. Boom! A silver-white figure fell from the sky and landed on the ground. The strong impact caused smoke and dust to fill the air. When the smoke and dust dispersed, an incomparably beautiful face was revealed. It turned out to be a beautiful female knight. Her mount was a handsome silver-winged Pegasus. The female knight's face was frosty as she asked coldly, Chapter 21. You're Ron. The beautiful female knight asked as she descended from the sky on a silver-winged Pegasus. Ron was stunned by the sudden appearance of the woman. He stared blankly at her without replying. What a beautiful girl! This woman's beauty shocked Ron. He only felt that this woman was very beautiful, so beautiful that it was suffocating. He had always thought that the mayor's daughter of Maple Leaf Town was already very beautiful. He used to fantasize every day that he could marry her after he became a magician. But now, the mayor's daughter couldn't even compare to the woman in front of him. The woman who appeared in front of Ron was Shea, the silver-winged Pegasus knight Shea. She had searched the sky for a day and finally found Ron on this small path. Seeing that Ron didn't answer, the woman reached into her bosom and took out an item from a small pouch. It was the portrait of Ron that Gerard had given her. The small pouch on her was called a space pouch. Although it was only the size of a palm, the space inside was not small. It could store about 1 cubic meter of items. Many mercenaries carried such pouches, and Shea was no exception. Yes, it's you. You're Ron. There's no mistaking it. Shea pondered for a long time and sized up Ron for a long time before confirming that the person in front of him was the child he was looking for. She smiled and asked, "Hey, are you Ron?" Ron was still in a daze. At this moment, Homeland's voice sounded in his mind. "Ron, this woman is very powerful. If she's not a friend, you'll be in trouble. You must be careful." "What? Is she very powerful?" Ron's heart tightened. He looked carefully and thought to himself, "This woman is very beautiful, but I can't tell that she's very powerful." Looking at Ron blankly staring at her like a dumb goose, Shea, who was accustomed to being stared at, couldn't help but blush, a trace of anger faintly flashing through her eyes. "Hey, are you listening? I'm talking to you." Shea raised her voice and shouted. Aha! Ron finally regained his senses and stuttered. Miss, you're looking for me?" There was a hint of anger in Shea's voice. "Who else should I look for? Let me ask you, are you Ron?" Ron froze for a moment and asked, "How do you know my name?" Hearing Ron's words, the woman smiled with satisfaction. "It really is you. That's right. You're looking for me? Why are you looking for me?" Ron would never have dreamed that this beautiful woman was looking for him. "Haha, of course I'm here to look for you. I've been looking for you all day," Shea said with a smile. "Come on, come back with me obediently. I won't make things difficult for you, huh?" Ron was puzzled. He scratched his head. Go back? Go back where?" "Naka Manor," Shea said casually. "Naka Manor." When Ron heard this, he took a step back. His face changed greatly. You're here to kill me." However, Ron was wrong. The stunning woman shook her head. "I won't kill you. I'll just take you back to Naka Manor and complete my mission," Ron sneered in his heart. The only good impression he had of this beautiful woman disappeared. "Isn't that the same? If I return to Naka Manor, will Gerard let me go?" Shea took a deep breath and said stiffly, "I don't care about that. I'm a mercenary. I only care about completing my mission." Ron took a step back and said with a sad smile, "Sure enough, are you mercenaries all rich and heartless? The young master of Naka Manor killed my grandfather. In order to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, he wants to kill me now. Is there no justice in this world?" Ron's current appearance was quite miserable. He didn't know how long it had been since he changed the clothes on his body. His thin body was shivering in the cold autumn wind. He was wearing old straw sandals and a big foot was exposed. Shea also saw that this young man was definitely a child of a poor family. She didn't know why the nobles of Naka Manor were chasing him. Looking at Ron's appearance, Shea felt a burst of heartache for no reason. She was also born in a poor family. She was just a little better than Ron, who had nothing. She could empathize with Ron's situation. However, Shea thought about how she came with a mission and couldn't help but harden her heart. She warned herself in her heart, Shea, oh Shea, you're a mercenary. You're here to do a mission. If you're soft-hearted when you see anything, you'd better not be a mercenary. Go home and take care of your child as soon as possible. Thinking of this, Shea hardened her heart and her face darkened. Cut the crap. Are you coming with me or not? No. Ron replied firmly, his stubborn eyes looking straight at Shea. Shea gently gritted her teeth and said cruelly, since that's the case, then don't blame me for being impolite. With that, Shea jumped off the silver-winged Pegasus and walked straight towards Ron. She didn't have a weapon in her hand. Shea was confident that with her strength, this 15-year-old child would definitely be captured easily. At this time, Ron also threw caution to the wind. Come on, all of you, mercenaries who help the evildoers, come and kill me if you have the guts. Ron stretched out his hand, and a small bone spur appeared in his palm, spinning around. Shea's face was as dark as water as she walked closer step by step. Necromancy, you really are a necromancer. You're courting death by cultivating this in the Holy Roman Empire. Put away your tricks. That trashy necromancy is useless against me. Pornographic novels, she didn't say much, but the person on top of Ron was so angry that his lungs almost exploded. What was wrong with this world? Homelin was depressed and puzzled at the same time. Everyone seemed to know about necromancy, but it was called trash and trash. What the F***ck was going on? This woman is too strong. Ron isn't her match. She's also a knight. With the silver-winged Pegasus in the air, I'm afraid he won't be able to escape even if he wanted to. Homelin thought to himself. Looks like I'll have to take action again this time, but this isn't a good thing for Ron. In Homelin's heart, Ron should experience more battles and face the cruelty of life head-on. He shouldn't hide behind him, and let him shelter him from the wind and rain. Just like a flower in a greenhouse, a sapling under the roots of a large tree, such a person would never become a talent. However, Ron's opponent this time was too strong. He'd only learned necromancy for a few days and wasn't her match at all. If he didn't help him, such a genius would fall here. Thinking of this, Homelin said in a low voice, Ron, this person is very strong. You're not her match. Let me do it, Ron nodded. At this time, he could tell that this woman's strength wasn't something he could match at his level. He quickly removed his defenses and allowed Homelin's soul to enter his consciousness. Very quickly, he felt that his body didn't belong to him anymore. Only his eyes could see. Shea walked over silently and reached out to grab Ron. At this moment, Ron moved. He suddenly raised his head, and a strange green light shone from his eyes. He reached out with lightning speed and grabbed Shea's wrist. Shea frowned and was shocked. What? This child has a lot of strength. She only felt a huge force. Thump, thump, thump. She retreated several steps. Her face was full of disbelief, and she said in a trembling voice, What's going on? How can a child like you have such great strength? Shea's profession was a knight. She practiced Do Chi, so her strength was much greater than ordinary people. Her body was also very tyrannical. Of course, this didn't refer to her muscles. Her strength wasn't something that ordinary people could contend with, let alone a thin and weak child. This child is a little strange. Shea's heart quickly flashed a thought. Ron didn't say anything because there was no need to. He waved his hand lightly. Skeleton summoning spell, 5 skeleton warriors scrambled to climb out from the ground. He's really a necromancer. He can summon skeletons. But why do these skeletons give me a dangerous feeling? Shea frowned. While Shea was hesitating, Ron commanded the skeleton warriors to rush forward. Shea didn't dare to underestimate the enemy. A light flashed in her space bag and a shining knight's sword appeared in her hand. She shouted, In my name, I summon fire, sword of flame. Like a white and tender radish, she stretched out her 2 slender jade fingers and a pillar of fire soared into the sky. The raging fire covered the tip of the sword. She was a practitioner of fire Do Chi. At this time, the 5 skeleton warriors had already rushed in front of her. Shea's almond eyes widened. "You're courting death!" A burst of blazing heat flashed and the raging fire sword danced into a red light. In the blink of an eye, the 5 skeleton warriors were burned by the fire and turned into ashes. Sword of Flame, this was the real Sword of Flame. As a senior knight, Shea's Sword of Flame couldn't be compared to Groot's. "I've said it before. This trashy necromancy magic is useless against me. Don't waste your energy and obediently surrender," Shea said coldly. "Ha!" At this time, Ron laughed. There was a trace of disdain in his laughter. "You do have some ability, but you're only a senior knight. You don't have the qualifications to be arrogant in front of me." Shea heard this and frowned. The other party's expression and tone didn't seem like something a 15-year-old child would say. These words made her uncomfortable. Shea snorted coldly. "Arrogance requires strength. With your strength, you don't seem to have the qualifications to be arrogant in front of me." Shea didn't want to be outdone. In a battle between the strong, even if you're at a disadvantage, you can't lose your momentum. Shea obviously learned this. Chapter 22. A few skeleton warriors were destroyed. Homelin smiled disapprovingly. Losing a few skeleton warriors had little effect on him. As he chanted a spell, a black spatial door opened. A tall figure appeared in Shea's line of sight. Black Knight. This was the advanced form of a skeleton warrior. It was riding a huge skeleton horse and was covered in black armor. Only a pair of green eyes could be seen. It held a bone spear in its hand. The tip of the spear hung down and emitted a cold light. Powerful! This was the only evaluation Ron had in his heart. This Black Knight was simply too flashy. It had a tall skeletal horse, sturdy heavy armor, and a bony spear that made one's heart palpitate. Ron stood beside it and felt a slight chill. "It's useless," Shea smiled. "Necromancers only know how to summon these things? Let me tell you, I've seen many necromancers on the streets of Land City in the Roland Empire. They summoned these creatures. I've seen even more flashy ones. Haha, but these things are useless against me. Empty appearance." Homelin was stunned for a moment. He nodded and didn't intend to say too much to her. He just smiled and said, "Is that so? Then let's try it." At this time, the Black Knight moved. He raised his extremely long bone spear, and the huge bone horse neighed. It spread out its 4 hooves and fiercely rushed toward Shea, launching an assault. Shea was full of confidence. She raised the powerful red fiery sword and drew a beautiful arc in the air. She was determined to fight with the Black Knight and shatter into pieces, just like those skeleton warriors. Boom! The bone spear and flame sword collided, creating huge sparks. Cracks appeared where the Black Knight and Shea were standing. "What?" Shea's expression changed. She felt an extremely powerful force coming from her sword. This force was not weaker than hers. It was even stronger than hers. Shea couldn't stop the force and was pushed back dozens of meters. The place where she had just retreated was burnt black. The Black Knight rode his skeleton horse and also took a step back to dissipate the force. There was no fear in his eyes. He once again aimed at her and raised his black spear. It was obvious who was the stronger one in this fight. Shea's face was pale. Through the fight just now, she truly felt the terror of a necromancer. How could it not be terrifying to be able to summon such a terrifying undead creature? Why? How can a skeleton riding a skeleton horse be so powerful? Shea's face was full of disbelief. Is this really necromancy? Are you really a necromancer? Shea asked. Ron didn't say anything. The Black Knight took a step forward, and Shea retreated in panic. Humans have an instinctive fear of things they don't know. Could the legend of necromancy be true? Could this be the true power of necromancy? Such a terrifying thought flashed through Shea's mind. For many years, many people in the Roland Empire had treated the legend of necromancy as a joke. If necromancy really had this kind of power, then it wouldn't be a joke anymore. No. Shea quickly shook her head. Even if this is necromancy, this kind of power isn't something a child can have. But no matter what, I am Shea, the silver-winged Pegasus Knight Shea, the genius of the Balavax Academy. I won't be defeated by a 15-year-old child. Ever since entering the Balavax Academy, Shea had earned the title of genius through her hard work and talent. Her strength had been acknowledged by all the teachers and students in the academy. This had nothing to do with her beauty. It also gave rise to Shea's strong self-esteem. I'm a genius. I won't allow failure. Shea's heart was suddenly ignited with a strong fighting spirit. Her hand firmly grasped the aquamarine one-handed knight sword in her hand. Her eyes were burning with an unyielding flame. She put her sharp jade finger in her mouth and whistled. The silver-winged Pegasus that was standing at the side ran over. Shea did a beautiful flip and mounted it. Then, she took out another piece of equipment from her portal bag. It was a silver-white shield. Shea was a knight. Only by combining her mount with the silver-winged Pegasus could she unleash her greatest attack power. If she was separated from her mount, then the knight's battle power would be reduced by half. After Shea completed all this, she realized that the Black Knight was still there. He didn't seem to have any intention of stopping her. Thinking of this, Shea couldn't help but feel angry. She clenched her teeth and thought to herself, "What an arrogant little guy. I'll let you know my power later," especially the indifferent expression on Ron's face. When Shea saw it, she gnashed her teeth in anger. It was a look of contempt that made her very uncomfortable. Shea rode on the silver-winged Pegasus. A trace of blood appeared on her pale face. Her confidence that had been shaved off by the Black Knight had recovered by more than half. Her long black hair was loose and slightly curled, revealing a cold and beautiful face. She held the silver-white shield in front of her and slightly raised the aquamarine one-handed sword in her hand. She took a deep breath and stared at Ron. It was as if she wanted to engrave him in her mind. She fiercely squeezed out a sentence from between her teeth. "Again?" Homelin smiled and raised one hand. The Black Knight charged over like a soldier who had received an order from their commander. Shea clenched her teeth and stretched out the one-handed sword. She shouted sternly, "Ron, no matter what, I will bring you back today." After saying this, Shea's one-handed sword slashed down. The silver-winged Pegasus let out a whinny and charged towards the Black Knight. "Charge, this little girl's fighting spirit is not bad," a voice sounded in Ron's mind. It turned out that it was Homelin talking to him. Shea's fighting spirit made Homelin praise her. Boom! Boom! The Black Knight and Shea broke out in an intense battle. Both sides went back and forth, and in the blink of an eye, they had exchanged more than 100 blows. Every time the bone spear and the one-handed sword collided, large amounts of sparks would burst forth. Every time Shea attacked, the silver-winged Pegasus would flap its wings and charge in tandem with its master. The strength of the person and the horse combined made the attack even more powerful. Man and horse as one. Shea's riding and swordsmanship had indeed reached a perfect realm. She was indeed a genius of the Balarax Academy. The Black Knight was not to be outdone. The black aura on his body thickened and he attacked Shea again and again. The two's attacks caused large amounts of dust to rise on the ground. Smoke filled the air, and flames and black aura intertwined. It was clear how intense the battle was. Shea's one-handed sword burned with flames, causing great damage to the Black Knight. Shea was getting more and more anxious as the battle dragged on. She gritted her teeth and clamped her legs together. The silver-winged Pegasus' silver wings opened wide, and a gust of wind blew. Shea rode the silver-winged Yellow Knight. The Pegasus flew into the air. "Wow! She's flying!" Ron exclaimed in his heart. He was full of envy for Shea's flying horse. Homelin smiled. "Don't worry, Ron. As long as your strength reaches her level, you can also fly. Flying required a large amount of energy. This was not something an ordinary practitioner could do. To fly, one would need to be at least at the adept level. This could only be used in battle, and not for long-distance flying. There were very few professions that could fly below the adept level. Knights were one of them. Shea was extremely shocked. She was in the middle of the battle, and no one knew the Black Knight's strength better than she did. It was an opponent that felt no pain, no fear, and no feelings. Its only existence was to fight. Coupled with its terrifying defense, it gave Shea a headache. What made her even more terrified was that this was only an undead creature summoned by the necromancer. The necromancer himself had been standing there without moving, nor did he have any intention of attacking. If the necromancer and the Dark Knight worked together, Shea didn't dare to think further. I have to end this quickly. If this goes on, I'll be in danger. Shea understood her situation. The difficulty of this temporary mission was beyond her imagination. She cursed Geralt in her heart. If she knew this necromancer was so difficult to deal with, she wouldn't have accepted it even if it was 10,000 gold coins. No one would accept it anyway. Necromancers were too scary. However, Shea didn't intend to back down. She was an extremely proud girl. In her career as a mercenary, she couldn't afford to fail. Not even once. The silver-winged Pegasus circled in the air. The Black Knight just stood there without moving. It didn't have the ability to fly, and could only open its green eyes and silently watch Shea's every move. Although I don't know how a 15-year-old child like you has such powerful strength, all of this is no longer important. Because you will die under my sword in the next moment. Shea's face revealed an unprecedented expression. She slowly raised her sword, and a sharp light flashed in her eyes. Ugly monster, go to hell for me! A blazing fireball appeared in the sky, radiating light in all directions. Shea raised her fiery fighting aura to the highest level. Her entire body emitted raging flames, painting her and her horse a beautiful golden color. The silver-winged Pegasus whinnied and spread its wings. The flames on its wings lit up half the sky. Fiery assault, in mid-air, Shea descended with raging flames on her body. She was like a goddess descending from the heavens, full of power. The blazing heat scorched the ground, and even the grass on the ground started to roll. This ferocious strike contained all of Shea's strength. Homelin didn't move. The Black Knight slowly raised its shield. Boom! Intense light burst forth from the ground. The flames spread in all directions, burning everything in the surroundings. Chapter 23. Ron's eyes widened. Shea's attack was effective. A large hole appeared on the Dark Knight's body, but there was no trace of blood. The blazing flames roasted half of the Dark Knight's body, and a burnt smell spread out. The Dark Knight's energy was dissipating, and even Homelin's soul energy was showing signs of instability. After this move, Shea's breathing became hurried, and her towering chest heaved up and down. It was clear that this move consumed a lot of do-chi. Shea forced a smile. Is this the so-called necromancy magic? It doesn't seem like much. She pointed the one-handed knight's sword in her hand and shouted, "You've already lost. Hurry up and surrender." Hormelin rolled his monstrous eyes and laughed. He defeated? It's still early. With that, he flipped his hand, and a green ball of air appeared in his palm, twirling around his fingertips. Death coil. The green ball of air was gently pushed out, and a cold gust of wind was like a demon from hell, carrying a powerful evil force. However, his target was not Shea, but the Dark Knight. Why was he attacking the Dark Knight? Ron's heart almost jumped out of his throat. Could it be that Grandpa Homelin had gone mad? Even Shea was shocked, and used her shield to protect herself. No, Homelin had not gone mad. The youth's ball of air wrapped tightly around the Dark Knight like a soft cotton. A black gas appeared on the Dark Knight's body, and the injured half of his body miraculously grew back, as if he had not been injured at all. Shea was completely stunned. The Dark Knight had regained his fighting strength, and he seemed even more ferocious than before. Grandpa Homelin, what was that necromancy magic just now? It was so powerful. In just an instant, the Dark Knight had recovered. Ron was communicating with Homelin using his soul. It's nothing. Homelin smiled. Death Entanglement is only a 6th rank necromancy spell. You'll be able to cast it when you become an advanced necromancer. Not only can this spell heal undead creatures, but it can also be used in battle. Ron, you have to watch carefully, Homelin said earnestly. Yes, Grandpa Homelin, I will. Ron nodded heavily. Just as Ron and Homelin's souls converged, the Dark Knight had already begun his attack. He clashed with Shea. The Dark Knight's attack and defense were extremely powerful. Just one Dark Knight was enough to fight Shea to a standstill. At this moment, Shea was no longer as arrogant as before. Her hair and sweat were all over her face, and her breathing was ragged. Even her moves had become messy, and she was forced to retreat by the Black Knight's bone spear. Only now did Shea know that the strength of her opponent's necromancy spell had far exceeded her imagination. She was extremely regretful of her rash actions. Especially when facing a 15-year-old child, Shea's self-esteem took a huge hit. Who would have thought that she, who had always been hailed as a genius, was actually weaker than a 15-year-old child? Looking at the small figure beside her and his indifferent expression, Shea's mind was in a mess. Even her moves became messy. On the other side, Homelin had a relaxed expression. On one hand, he used his spiritual sense to command the Dark Knight in battle. On the other hand, he was personally teaching Ron. Through his words and actions, and with a living example right in front of him, Ron felt like he was enlightened the more he watched. A necromancer is not as simple as just summoning undead creatures to fight for him. This kind of necromancer can only be considered inferior. There are differences in strength between necromancers of the same level. A true necromancer must be able to perfectly coordinate with the undead creatures he summons. This way there will be 2 or more active attackers, causing the opponent to be flustered. Something like this, as Homelin spoke, his hands made a mysterious gesture. At this moment, Ron felt as if the raindrops around him were gathering together, and a powerful force filled the entire space. A faint green light appeared on Ron's body. Wherever the light went, a large amount of soul energy would continuously condense. Bone Spear, a long spear, suddenly appeared in Homelin's hands. This spear was white in color, and the white bones gave off a strange feeling. The only thing Ron could be sure of was how powerful the soul energy contained in this small bone spear was. At this moment, Homelin made his move without any warning. The long bone spear carried with it a strong rotation, making an ear-piercing sound as it pierced through the air. The bone spear carried a powerful evil energy and mercilessly struck Shea's one-handed sword away. The most important thing in battle was to be distracted. Immediately after, she was swept off her horse by the Dark Knight's bone spear. When she stood up, the sharp bone spear was pointed at her throat. At this moment, Ron also understood the meaning of cooperation. The cooperation between a necromancer and a summoned creature? I think I can do it too. Ron thought silently. Defeated, I actually lost. And I lost to a useless necromancer. Shea's heart was blank. He's only a 15-year-old child. Shea looked at Ron in disbelief. Is this really the strength of a 15-year-old child? You lost. At this moment, Ron stood in front of her. There was no trace of pride on his face, only a calm expression. Kill me, pornographic novel. Shea closed her eyes. She could not bear the humiliation of such a crushing defeat. Hot tears flowed down her cheeks. I don't like to kill people. Leave. Homelin was not a bloodthirsty person. He did not feel any killing intent from Shea, so he let her go. I will kill you. Hearing this, Shea did not feel happy. Instead, she felt endless humiliation. She did not care about the bone spear at her throat and fiercely pounced at Ron. Damn, this lass is crazy. Seeing this, Homelin was shocked and hurriedly dodged. At this moment, he changed his mind and the Black Knight moved. The bone spear swept across Shea's body. Shea squatted down in pain. Following that, Ron softly spat out 2 words. Bone prison. With a kacha sound, a few long white bones protruded from the ground and firmly stuck him inside, unable to move. Kill me! Kill me! Shea did not know why, but she hysterically screamed. Her fragile self-esteem shattered like a crystal ball. She broke down. Cough! Homelin coughed lightly and said to Ron, "This lass is a little crazy. I'll leave her to you. You can do whatever you want with her." Homelin turned into a cloud of black gas and entered the ring. Ron felt that he had regained control of his body. He moved his arms and legs and then looked at Shea, who was trapped in the bone prison. Shea had received a lot of shock. Her eyes were lifeless and her mouth muttered, "Kill me." If she was defeated by a strong person, it would be better. However, she was defeated by a 15-year-old boy. This was something that Shea could not accept. This was also the reason why her arrogant self-esteem collapsed. A pair of bare feet appeared in front of her. Shea slowly raised her head. Ron walked to the front of the bone prison and reached out to pick up her sword. "Am I going to die?" Shea's face showed a relieved expression. She closed her eyes. "It's good that I'm dead. This way, I won't have to face this kind of humiliation." There were faint traces of tears on her beautiful face. Her stubborn expression made people feel love and pity for her. Ron's heart slightly trembled. After a long time, Ron sighed, "You can go. Don't follow me." With that, he stabbed Shea's sword into the ground and turned around to leave. Shea was angry. She desperately clenched her teeth. Even the humiliation of defeat did not make her this angry. This was a kind of disregard. Naked disregard. In other words, the other party was only a 15-year-old child. He did not even put her in his eyes. He did not even want to kill her. Shea's eyes flashed with a murderous look. She said word by word, "Ron, you will regret this. You will definitely regret this." Shea's crying voice echoed in the valley. But Ron had already gone far. Ron was not worried about Shea at all. Grandpa Homelin told him that the bone prison would loosen after a period of time. This bone prison could only trap her for a while. With Shea's ability, it would not be difficult for her to escape. "Grandpa Homelin, what do you think is the matter with that young lady? She came to kill me. I let her go, but she seemed to be dissatisfied?" Ron asked Homelin with a naive face. Homelin smiled. "She is a knight. A knight's dignity does not allow her to lose, especially to lose to you." "Why?" Ron asked. He really did not understand Shea's mentality. He let her go, but she hated him. What was the reason? Homelin smiled, but did not say it out. He was using Ron's body, but his strength was his. Imagine, a person who thought himself to be a genius was defeated by a 15-year-old kid. How could Ron understand the blow he received? Seeing Homelin not answering, Ron also changed the topic. He smiled and said, "Grandpa Homelin, that beautiful young lady's strength is not that great." "No, Ron, you are wrong." Homelin smiled. "She is very strong. At her age, her strength has reached such a level. It is indeed not simple. I am also very happy that you have reached such a level at her age." Homelin said with a smile. "Wow, she is so powerful. Grandpa Homelin, did you use your full strength to defeat her?" Ron asked excitedly. "Of course." Homelin smiled. "No, I only used 20% of my strength." Chapter 24. Early in the morning, in front of Naka Manor, the morning glow painted the castle-like Naka Manor gold. A white silver-winged Pegasus covered in the morning light slowly descended in front of Naka Manor. A beautiful female knight wearing heavy armor walked down from the silver-winged Pegasus, startling everyone in the manor. "Who is she? Is she the manor lord's guest?" a servant asked. "I don't know, I don't recognize her. Her mount is a silver-winged Pegasus, she must be a strong person," an old servant replied. "She's so beautiful, it would be great if she could be my wife." A young servant stared at the other's towering chest, fiercely swallowing his saliva a few times. "In your dreams," another female servant said, but her gaze was also filled with jealousy. The servants in Naka Manor whispered to each other. The beautiful female knight knocked on the door. Not long after, the door opened, and a sleepy Chitley opened the door. He had just woken up. "Hey, who are you looking for?" The beauty outside the door made Chitley's eyes light up, and all his sleepiness was gone. "It's you?" The person who came was Shea. She had come to refund the money. The mission had failed, so there was nothing to say. Of course, there was no guarantee for the temporary mission. Shea could take the money and leave, but she had her own dignity and would absolutely not do so. Seeing Shea, Chitley revealed his charms and said with a smile, "Beauty, are you looking for me?" Quickly come in, however. At this moment, Shea's face was covered with frost, and her charming big eyes were about to spit out fire. In this mission, the other party's information was wrong, causing her to suffer a great loss and humiliation, especially when she was taught a lesson by a 15-year-old boy, making her lose her face and unable to vent her anger. Seeing the lecherous Chitley, Shea only felt a burst of nausea, and she flipped out. "Take back your stinky money, I'm not doing this mission." Shea took out a bag from her bosom and ruthlessly threw it at Chitley. Ouch! Before Chitley could react, he felt a pain on his head, and immediately a big bump appeared. The glistening yellow gold coins scattered, crashing onto the ground. Chitley stood there in a daze. Shea didn't say anything else, nor did she explain, and turned to leave. "Ouch, why did you hit me? It hurts, you don't go." Chitley covered half of his face and shouted, "Men, stop her." The young master had spoken, but no one in Manor Naka stepped forward. Everyone knew how strong the other party was. Manor Naka didn't have the qualifications to stop her. He had to obey the young master's orders, but his own life was more important. Shea didn't pay attention to Chitley. He got on his horse and pulled the reins. The silver-winged Pegasus ran a few steps and soared into the sky. Only the baffled young master Chitley was left standing there in a daze. In a dark forest, Ron relied on the weak light to build a small shack on a large tree. He had learned this craft from Grandpa Zaley. At that time, Ron had only learned it for fun, but he didn't expect it to be put to good use now. First, he used a few thick branches to build a simple frame on the tree, tied it tightly with a strong straw rope, and then covered the surroundings with thatch, leaving a small hole for easy access. It looked like a large bird's nest. In such a shack, the wind couldn't blow in, the rain couldn't come in, and people lived inside. It was warm in winter and cool in summer. The only bad thing was that when people slept inside, the hard branches made Ron's back hurt. Fortunately, he was used to hard times and could bear this little bit of pain. It had been 3 days and 3 nights since Ron left after the battle between Homelin and silver-winged Pegasus Knight Shea. In these few days, in order to prevent Geralt from sending people to chase after him, Ron traveled day and night, specially finding some remote road. After a few days, Ron's feet had a large number of blisters, so he came here. Ron didn't know where this place was. He only knew that it was an uninhabited forest, with all kinds of unknown towering trees rising from the ground. Some of the trees were so big that it would take more than 10 people to hug them. But he couldn't come here. There were no roads on the ground, and all kinds of weeds grew. These weeds were more than a meter tall, and Ron could only see his head as he walked. This forest had a special characteristic, and that was darkness. Even during the day, when the sun was at its strongest, the forest was still as dark as dusk. Needless to say, during the night, it was normal to not be able to see one's 5 fingers. A long time ago, Ron picked up a night novel called The Count's Revenge. The main character in the book trained his strength in the forest, and finally got his revenge. This gave Ron an idea. If he wanted to train, it was best to go to an uninhabited place. Moreover, this forest gave Ron a feeling of safety. As a necromancer who walked in the darkness was the best protection. Ron nimbly slipped down from the tree. Ever since he started practicing necromancy magic, he felt that his movements had become a lot more nimble. "Ron, you really don't plan to leave the Holy Roman Empire?" Homelin couldn't help but ask. He knew that it would be dangerous for Ron to stay in the Holy Roman Empire. It had to be known that necromancy magic was forbidden in the Holy Roman Empire. "Yes, Grandpa Homelin." Regarding this matter, Ron was unexpectedly insistent. "If I don't take revenge for Grandpa Zachary, I won't leave the Holy Roman Empire." Homelin nodded, looking at Ron with a gratified gaze. He felt that in this gloomy forest, there were dangers lurking everywhere. This kind of place was the ideal place to train. A simple shack, a hard life, and all kinds of fierce battles every day to obtain food. This kind of environment was the best way to train a person's will. Ron's choice wasn't wrong. In Homelin's eyes, this was the true way to train. Compared to those aristocratic children, lying on soft beds every day, eating all kinds of exquisite food, waving their arms symbolically in luxurious training rooms, and having beautiful maids gently massage them when they were tired, growing up in this kind of environment would easily make people lose their drive. And a strong drive was a necessary condition to become a powerhouse. Hee, Ron, you've solved the problem of your living quarters, but what about the food? Homelin laughed. Don't worry, Grandpa Homelin, Ron replied. I can cook by myself. Of course, if I can catch some prey. When Ron was in Maple Leaf Town, it was common to catch pheasants and wild hares in the woods behind the Maple Forest Ancient Road. Now that his strength had increased greatly, he had great confidence in hunting. Then I'm relieved, Homelin said with a chuckle. Then, he straightened his face and said seriously, Ron, since you've chosen to walk the path of a necromancer, it means that you're going against the Holy See. Moreover, you have to take revenge for Grandpa. I won't say much about the dangers involved. Homelin paused and continued, the strong always grow under pressure. Ron, the first task I'm giving you is to survive in this dangerous place. Ron nodded heavily. Homelin smiled again. So, from now on, I won't help you with anything other than giving you pointers on your cultivation. It's even more impossible for me to enter your body to solve your crisis. So, you'll have to rely on yourself to survive here. Ron's gaze changed slightly, but he thought for a while and nodded. He said with a firm gaze, I understand, Grandpa Homelin. Homelin smiled and said, Ron, how many necromancy spells have you learned? 3. Ron tilted his head and thought for a while. He pointed with his fingers and said, the first is the skeleton summoning spell, the second is the bone spur spell, and the third is the skeleton restoration spell. Not bad. Homelin smiled. I'll now pass on the fourth necromancy spell to you. Bone Shield. Bone Shield was a necromancer's most basic defensive spell. Homelin had passed on 3 necromancy spells to Ron. The first was a summoning spell, the second was an offensive spell, the third was a support spell, and the fourth was a defensive spell. In this dangerous forest, Ron learning a defensive spell would greatly increase his chances of survival. While Ron was in a daze, Homelin pointed with his finger. A green light shot out from his finger and shot into Ron's forehead, disappearing without a trace. With a turn of his mind, Ron discovered that there was something extra in his mind. It was the cultivation method of the Bone Shield. Ron, with your current strength, this is all I can teach you. You won't be able to learn any higher-level necromancy magic. Merlin's expression was a bit dejected. He waved his hand. In the battle with that female knight I lost quite a bit of soul force. With that, he laughed bitterly. I originally thought that I could still recover my soul force, but in reality it's less and less. Ron, I'm afraid that I'll need to sleep for a period of time to recover. During this time, I'm afraid that you'll have to rely on yourself. Ron took a closer look. Indeed, Homelin had lost quite a bit of soul force, and his body had become much dimmer. Grandpa Homelin, thank you. Ron was somewhat moved. If not for me, you wouldn't have lost so much soul force. Silly child, what nonsense are you saying? Homelin smiled. I'm already connected to your soul. Do you think that I'll still be alive if you die? With that, he sighed. However, even if I recover some soul force, I'm afraid that I won't be able to help you much. From now on, you'll have to rely on yourself, Grandpa Homelin. Will you? Ron asked a little worriedly. He was a necromancer who also cultivated soul force. He naturally knew how important the loss of soul force was to Homelin's soul body. When the loss of soul force reached a certain level, Homelin would even directly disappear. This was because he was originally a life form formed from soul force. Homelin smiled. It's fine. Sleeping can recover a portion of my soul force. He glanced at the soul ring in Ron's hand and smiled. This is all thanks to it. With that, he paused and said, Ron, you have to use this soul ring well. Although I've had this soul ring for many years, I've never been able to decipher its secret. I keep feeling that its origins aren't as simple as it seems. Ron, if you break through to become a novice necromancer, let your soul enter this ring. At that time, I'll teach you even more advanced necromancy magic. After saying this, Homelin's figure slowly faded until it disappeared. He returned to the ring. The forest returned to its tranquility. Homelin's soul once again fell asleep. Ron stood alone under the tree. In this dark and quiet forest, Ron felt an unprecedented loneliness for the first time. This way, I can only rely on myself. Ron clenched his fist. I'll definitely be able to survive here until I take revenge for Grandpa Zaley, Ron warned himself. Chapter 25. In front of the mercenary tavern, the students of the Balarax Academy had already packed up. Where's Shea? Why isn't she back yet? It's already been 3 days. Ifat was a little anxious. He hadn't seen Shea for a few days. It's just a small mission. It can't be that difficult, right? Kadena was also puzzled. She blinked her big eyes. But it's really strange. There are necromancers in the Holy Roman Empire. Even if they want to train, they can go to the Roland Empire or other places. It should be said that the necromancer is too stupid. That's right. What does a 15-year-old child know? Ifat laughed. The Roland Empire is still better. It's a country of freedom. We can train in whatever we want. There are no taboos as long as it doesn't violate the Empire's laws. It's not like the Holy Roman Empire, where they don't allow anyone to train. I felt uncomfortable the moment I came to the Holy Roman Empire. If you don't want to come, then go back. No one forced you to come, Mocklin said coldly. Mocklin's words were sarcastic, making Ifat so angry that his face turned red. He pressed one hand on his portal bag and shouted, Mocklin, are you looking for death? Mocklin was not to be outdone. He sneered. Haha, whether I'm looking for death or not depends on whether you have the ability. Good. Good. Ifat was so angry that he laughed. He didn't waste any time and directly pulled out his two-handed sword from his portal bag. Then let me see how much you've improved. Bring it on. I'm not afraid of you. Mocklin also took out his white, jade-like paladin scepter from his portal bag. The two stared coldly at each other, neither giving way to the other. Stop arguing. Look, Sister Shea is back. At this moment, Kadena pointed at the black dot in the sky. Her sharp eyes had already spotted Shea's silver-winged Pegasus. When Shea returned, the two immediately lost interest in the duel. Ifate snorted coldly, put away his sword and said, "You're lucky today, but I won't let this go so easily." Mocklin also sneered and put away his scepter. If it was a duel, he definitely wouldn't be afraid of Ifat. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been the captain. The Ballarak's academy had no lack of geniuses. Shea's silver-winged Pegasus flapped its wings and landed on the ground. "You're back, Shea." Ifat quickly walked up to her, his eyes full of concern. "How was it? Did the mission go well?" Hearing this, Shea's body visibly trembled. She faintly replied, She didn't say whether it was completed or not. However, Kadena could see that Shea didn't seem to be in good spirits. She walked up to support Shea's arm and asked with concern, "Sister Shea, are you okay?" Shea forced a smile. "I'm fine, eh?" Just as Shea turned around, Kadena froze for a moment. She discovered that a small, inconspicuous crack had appeared on the back of Shea's breastplate. Didn't she go to catch a 15-year-old necromancer? How could this be? Looking at Shea's pale face, it was obvious that she had gone through an extremely fierce battle. Kadena was puzzled. What's going on? Shea obviously didn't notice this. After the battle with Ron, she had suffered some injuries. Most importantly, she had used up a lot of her fighting aura. She didn't want to appear in front of her classmates in such a miserable state. Being defeated by a 15-year-old using the trashiest necromancy magic wasn't something to be proud of. Shea was also afraid of being ridiculed, so she found an inn to rest for 2 days before daring to appear in front of her classmates. At this time, she absent-mindedly led her silver-winged Pegasus over and said, "Let's go." Mocklin nodded. "Let's go." Although Kadena was puzzled, she was a considerate girl and didn't ask about it. She could also tell that Shea was trying to hide something. A frog slowly crawled out of a hole on a large bluestone covered in aquatic plants by the river. Its eyes were bulging high, its belly was round, and there was a strange circular protrusion on its lower jaw. It was its poison sac. Poison arrow frog, a level 3 wild beast. When attacked, it would shoot out fatal poison arrows. Even practitioners had to be careful when dealing with it. In the darkness, a pair of pitch-black eyes stared at the poison arrow frog. He was hiding in the shadows of the trees, his body covered in a thick layer of leaves, using the natural camouflage to hide his tracks. When the poison arrow frog turned around, its back was facing the other party. At this time, the shadow in the forest moved. He chanted a magic incantation in a low voice, his hand gestures constantly changing. Not long after, a skeletal warrior suddenly appeared, waving the bone knife in its hand and pouncing towards the poison arrow frog. The skeletal warrior raised its hand, its pitch-black eyes flashing with a green light as it made a charging posture. The poison arrow frog was stunned for a moment, but as a creature of the dark forest, its reaction wasn't slow. It bounced off its legs and jumped up like a cannonball, easily dodging the skeletal warrior's charging attack. "Damn it, that guy is really fast!" The shadow in the darkness roared in annoyance. It was obvious that the sneak attack just now had failed. The poison arrow frog suddenly opened its mouth, its poison sac contracting, and a green liquid shot out like an arrow, fast, accurate, and ruthless. Hiss! At this time, a sharp sound was heard. At the same time, white smoke rose from the skeletal warrior's chest. It turned out that the skeletal warrior couldn't dodge in time and was hit by the powerful poison spat out by the poison arrow frog. A large hole immediately appeared in its fragile bones, and this hole continued to expand, emitting a hiss, hiss sound. Wow, what a strong poison! If a human body were to touch even a little bit, it would be over. The shadow in the forest cried out exaggeratedly. Then, the shadow raised its hands, and black smoke appeared in its hands. "Watch me, skeleton restoration spell." The skeleton restoration spell was released, and a strange energy began to repair the skeletal warrior's damaged bones. Crackling sounds came from its body, and the corroded bones instantly grew back. Seeing that its attack was ineffective, the poison arrow frog became angry. It croaked, but its round eyes were fixed on the back of the figure behind the tree. The skeleton in front of it was only a puppet, and the one it wanted to attack was the one controlling the puppet. It opened its mouth and shot out another poison arrow, but its target was the shadow behind the tree. "Hee hee, you found me so quickly." "Not bad," the shadow was unhurried. It stretched out its hands, and without chanting, a shield made of bones suddenly appeared in front of it. Another hiss sound was heard. The poison arrow hit the bone shield, and white smoke rose, emitting a strong sour smell, causing the shadow in the tree to frown. "You only have one move, and it's nothing new. Go to hell, watch me, bone spike." After the shadow finished this sentence, a black bone spike as long as a dagger flew out of his hand and shot straight at the poison arrow frog like an arrow. Croak! The poison arrow frog let out the last whine of its life. Its head was penetrated by the powerful bone spike, and it was nailed straight to the tree. The sharp bone spike was still trembling. Done. "Hee hee, tonight's dinner is settled." The shadow behind the tree came out. He was none other than Ron. It had been more than 3 months since he escaped from Maple Leaf Town. For 3 months, Ron had been living alone in the dark forest. Every day, in addition to cultivation, he hunted and struggled to fill his stomach. In the beginning, Ron thought that he was very powerful, and that it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill level 2 and level 3 beasts with his powerful necromancy magic. But he later discovered that even with necromancy magic, it wasn't that easy to hunt prey in the dark forest. The beasts here lived in the midst of slaughter every day, and their vigilance and reaction were very strong. In the beginning, Ron was almost killed by prey several times because of magic mistakes, let alone hunting. For a few days, Ron had to cultivate with an empty stomach. When he could not stand it anymore, he would pick wild fruits to fill his stomach. However, with the improvement of Ron's cultivation and his proficiency in necromancy magic, hunting became much easier. Within a radius of 10 miles, all the beasts that could threaten Ron had been eaten by Ron. This level 3 poison arrow frog was the last beast that could threaten him. If it was 3 months ago, Ron would not even be able to take a poison arrow. Although the poison arrow frog was highly poisonous, its meat was surprisingly delicious. Ron had unknowingly started drooling when he stared at it. This poison arrow frog weighed more than 5 kilograms, enough for Ron to eat a few meals. Ron smiled as he approached. The poison arrow frog's head had been smashed to pieces by the bone spur, but its body was still intact. Crouching down, a bone spur appeared in Ron's hand. He carefully removed the poison sac from the frog's body and threw it to the side. Fortunately, the sac was not broken. If even a little bit of poison came into contact with it, he would not be able to eat the frog meat. "Heh, you almost killed me back then, and now you're in my stomach." Ron laughed proudly as he dissected the poison arrow frog with the bone spur. After skillfully dissecting the frog and skewering the meat with twigs, Ron found a few pieces of dry wood and pornographic material. He then started a fire on the spot. Ron placed the skewered frog meat on a simple rack. The pile of firewood below burned, making crackling sounds. Not long after, the frog meat turned an alluring golden color. Ron spun the stick in his hand, trying to burn every part of the frog meat evenly as he muttered to himself, "The bone shield that Grandpa Homelin taught me is really useful. It saved my life a few times, but the speed at which I summon the bone shield is still a bit slow. If only I could be a bit faster. After all, this is my only life-saving skill." Chapter 26. The frog leg had been roasted to a golden color, exuding an enchanting aroma. At this time, Ron had already felt hungry. He didn't care about etiquette and directly grabbed a frog leg from the fire and gnawed on it. Although the frog meat had no oil or salt, it still tasted very good. Ron was used to living a hard life, so he didn't mind. At this time, Ron was wearing clothes woven from animal skin. His naked upper body was covered with leaves. From afar, he looked like a savage. However, due to the nutrition, Ron had become much taller and stronger. He was no longer the thin and weak little radish head he used to be. After many years of activities in the forest, his muscles had become strong, his skin had become dark, and his pair of dark eyes were glowing. Except for the fact that his clothes were sloppy, his demeanor and temperament had undergone earth-shaking changes. The frog meat that had just been taken from the fire still had an extremely high temperature on the surface. It scalded Ron until he grimaced. He breathed out while stuffing the frog meat into his mouth. He was really hungry. Delicious. Ron gnawed on the fresh and tender frog meat in big mouthfuls. His mouth made tsk sounds of praise. Suddenly, Ron's face changed greatly. Wah! Ron abruptly threw down the frog meat, covered his head, and let out a miserable scream. Pain, severe pain. This kind of pain seemed to come from the depths of his soul. It was extremely painful, causing Ron to scream again and again. He was rolling on the ground in pain. What's going on? In a trance, Ron's spiritual sense entered the depths of his soul. In his spiritual sense, a large amount of soul force was sucked dry. The black fog was constantly condensing in one direction. In the depths of Ron's soul, a black ball of light was constantly absorbing soul force. As more and more soul force gathered, the ball of light also became bigger and bigger. In the ball of light, a figure faintly appeared. The face of the figure was similar to Ron. His face also showed a painful expression. This is my soul. Ron was dumbfounded. This was the second time he had seen his own soul. The black ball of light continued to expand and contract. Every time it went through a cycle, it would release a powerful soul power. What a powerful soul force! What's going on? Ron was extremely shocked. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. Could it be that I'm about to break through? Just as Ron had thought, he was indeed about to break through. For the past 3 months, he had been cultivating all the time, desperately accumulating his soul force. Finally, the quantitative change had led to a qualitative change. He was about to break through from an intermediate apprentice necromancer to an advanced apprentice necromancer. At this moment, the black sphere of light had expanded to its limit, and the amount of soul force it could contain had also reached its limit. Finally, a crack appeared on the surface of the black sphere of light. More and more cracks appeared, bigger and bigger. Finally, crash! The transparent black ball of light shattered like fragile glass, revealing Ron's soul trapped inside. In a spiritual space of nothingness, Ron's soul slowly stood up. His body emitted a powerful soul force that was 3 times stronger than before. This soul's face revealed a rare expression of joy, as if he had taken off an inappropriate piece of clothing. Black mist swirled around him. Ron discovered that the black mist was much thicker than before. Ron only felt his head lighten, and the pain was gone. He opened his eyes. I broke through? Ron woke up and looked at everything in a daze. He didn't expect that he would break through in the time it took to eat a meal. He looked at his hands. There was nothing different about them. The only difference was that Ron felt that these hands were full of power. If the soul force before was a small puddle, then the current soul force could be considered a small pool. Ron's mind moved, and a faint black mist overflowed from his fingers. This power was much more abundant than before. He felt as if he had suddenly gained a large amount of wealth. No matter how he squandered it, he couldn't squander it all. Too powerful, Ron was excited. He didn't expect that his soul force would increase so much after his breakthrough. How about testing the power? This was an idea that suddenly appeared in Ron's mind after his breakthrough. Ron slowly raised his hand, and a wisp of black mist wrapped around his fingers. Bone spur! Ron's eyes flashed sharply, and a bone spur came out of his hand. Like an arrow leaving the string, it shot straight towards the large blue stone more than 10 meters away. Bang! With a bang, it went straight to the hilt. What a strong penetrating power, what a fast speed! Ron was also shocked. After breaking through to senior apprentice necromancer, the penetrating power and speed of the bone spur had directly increased by a level. Now, if he were to face the captain of the Naka guards, Groot, he would definitely be able to easily write a pornographic novel. Kill him easily. Great! Ron was so happy that he jumped 3 feet high. This time, he was one big step closer to his goal of revenge. If Grandpa Homelin knew that I had broken through, he would be very happy. Ron thought excitedly. I have to tell him the news. Ron tried to use his soul force to call out a few times, but he couldn't get any response from Grandpa Homelin. Strange? He's not really asleep, is he? Ron scratched his head helplessly. Suddenly, he thought of something and patted his head. Ah, right, Grandpa Homelin said that as long as I break through, let my soul enter the ring, and then he will pass on new necromancy magic to me. But how do I get in? Ron was in a dilemma again. He looked at the ring in his hand and his gaze focused. Let's try it. He carefully guided his soul force and slowly penetrated it into the ring. At this time, he felt a strange suction force from the ring that sucked his soul in. In the small pond by the river, only Ron was left sitting there in a daze. His eyes were open, but there was no spirit in them, as if he had become retarded. His soul force had already entered the ring, leaving only an empty shell outside. What is this place? Ron was in a daze. His soul had entered an unfamiliar place. In the soul ring, the sky was hazy, making it unreal. There was no light, but the sky was so bright. On the other hand, the ground was a blur. Crash! Ron took a step forward and kicked something. He heard a crisp sound. Ah, Ron was shocked. It turned out that he had kicked the head of a sinister skull. The skull rolled to the side. What is this? Ron raised his head and looked at everything in front of him in a daze. In front of him, there was a field of white bones. These bones piled up into a mountain, and he couldn't see the end of it. Ron's heart trembled. If a skeleton was a person's corpse, how many corpses would there be here? No matter what this place is, let's find Grandpa Homelin first. Ron thought about it and decided to find him first. But at this time, he was dumbfounded. This place was so big, where should he find Grandpa Homelin? Grandpa Homelin! Grandpa Homelin! Ron cupped his hands around his mouth and called out more than 10 times, but there was no response. Even if there was an echo, it didn't come back. Ron had no choice but to slowly walk forward. If he couldn't find Grandpa Homelin, his soul could only withdraw. Ron walked all the way and saw white bones everywhere. The skulls had large black eye sockets. But what made Ron feel strange was that none of the bones here were complete. They were all scattered bones that were pieced together again. When people stepped on them, they would make caw-caw sounds. If an ordinary person saw a mountain of bones, they would be scared silly. But Ron wasn't afraid. As a practitioner of necromancy magic, he felt a strong sense of familiarity when he saw these skeletons. As he walked, Ron discovered that a vague shadow appeared in front of him. The closer he got, the bigger the shadow became, and a clear corridor appeared. It was a castle. This was a castle made of white bones. White bones could be seen everywhere, and a huge skull could be seen in the middle of the castle's gate. This skull was bigger than a house, and took up 1/5 of the castle. It opened its mouth wide, revealing white teeth. There was a pair of sinister horns on its head. Its empty eye sockets stared ahead, as if it wanted to devour someone. Below the huge skull, there were 2 strong skeleton guards. These 2 skeleton guards were much bigger than the skeleton warriors Ron summoned. They were over 3 meters tall and held long 2-handed axes in their hands, guarding the castle's only main gate. The skeleton guards' 2 axes crisscrossed, forming an X shape, warning anyone who dared to invade the castle. As long as the enemy dared to come, the huge axes would chop them into minced meat. After passing through the stone bridge over the moat, Ron slowly walked to the front of the castle's gate. At this time, the eyes of the huge skull above the gate lit up with green flames. The green flames were like eyes, and it was as if they were staring at the little Ron. The whole castle seemed to come alive. This scene scared Ron. He took a step back, and his eyes showed a look of alertness. At this moment, the pitch-black eyes of the 2 huge skeleton guards also lit up with faint green flames, as if they had come to life. Swoosh! The 2 crossed axes opened up. The 2 skeleton guards raised their axes and hung them on the ground, like well-trained soldiers. Ron was shocked. He calmed down, pointed to his nose and said, "This? Is it letting me in?" No one answered him. The 2 huge skeleton guards stood straight, as if they didn't hear him. Ron couldn't help but awkwardly touched his nose. No one is paying attention to me. But it seems that they don't have any hostility. He gathered his courage and slowly walked closer. Ron raised his head vigilantly, looking at the 2 huge skeleton guards. Those 2 huge axes were still in the air, and didn't seem to be falling down. Ron was relieved. He came to the castle's gate and gently placed his hands on the door handle. Chapter 27. A gust of gloomy cold air blew in his face, and Ron's body couldn't help but shiver. Smelling the moldy smell of the castle, Ron felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity that he hadn't felt in a long time. It was as if he had returned to his own home. What is this place? Why does it feel so familiar? Since no one could tell him the answer, Ron could only narrow his eyes and size up the magnificent building. In the center of the castle was a large hall, and Ron was standing at the side of the hall. The main hall was as big as 3 football fields. It looked extremely spacious and empty. The glass windows in the main hall emitted a faint light, adding some brightness to the dark main hall. Suddenly, Ron's gaze fell on a crystal coffin in the center of the hall. When he walked over to take a look, Ron suddenly covered his mouth and cried out in surprise. Grandpa Homelin, the one hiding in the crystal coffin, was none other than Homelin. His eyes were tightly shut as if he was sleeping. Ron stretched out his hand and gently pinched Homelin's hand. He only felt that it was ice-cold to the touch, as if it was a physical object. It wasn't like the usual, when it was just a spirit body. Ron thought for a moment. It was very pornographic. He quickly understood that this might be because he was also a spirit body. So Grandpa Homelin is sleeping here. I think I shouldn't disturb him. However, he told me to come find him after I advanced in strength and impart to me higher-level necromancy magic. But where is this necromancy magic? Ron didn't dare to disturb Homelin's sleep. He bowed and left, but at the same time, he was puzzled. He was wondering where the necromancy magic left behind by Grandpa Homelin was. Suddenly, Ron's gaze fell on a stone tablet not far from the crystal coffin. This stone tablet seemed to have an extremely strong attraction force that made him quickly walk over. The stone tablet was engraved with mysterious runes that looked like small tadpoles, but Ron didn't recognize any of the words on it. Ron stared at the stone tablet in a daze. Otherwise, why would he suddenly extend his hand towards the stone tablet? When he gently touched the stone tablet, it was as if he had touched a calm pool of water. Suddenly, a water-like ripple spread out rapidly, and the stone tablet changed in an instant. The small tadpoles on the stone tablet seemed to have come alive, and suddenly began to twist crazily. At the same time, the stone tablet also emitted a faint green light. Ron was shocked and took a step back. A faint green light spread out, illuminating half of the hall. Gradually, the small tadpoles on the stone tablet dispersed, and then condensed again. Finally, they turned into characters. It was the language of the Noah continent. Ron was flabbergasted. Could this be the high-level necromancy magic that Grandpa Homelin left for me? At the top of the stone tablet, the one that Ron had learned before was ranked first. Bone spur. Suddenly, the tadpoles on the stone tablet moved again, turning into a ball of green light and entering Ron's mind. His soul slowly retreated from the soul ring, and Ron's soul returned to his body. When Ron was in the soul ring, it felt like a long time had passed, but in reality, only 15 minutes had passed in the real world. The new necromancy magic made Ron indescribably excited, and he treated it like a treasure. He didn't care about anything else and immediately began to cultivate and comprehend it. This time, Ron had indeed gained a lot. On the stone tablet in the undead castle, other than the bone spur, skeleton summoning spell, and bone shield that he had learned before, he had also learned 3 extremely useful necromancy spells. The first was Bone Arrow. Its use was similar to Bone Spur, but it had a longer range and was more powerful. The second was Crow. It was a necromancy spell used for scouting. It could detect enemies from far away without being discovered by them. The third was Skeleton Acceleration spell. As the name suggested, it could increase the speed of skeleton warriors. Only now did Ron realize the terror of necromancy magic. If he could master these 3 necromancy spells, with the Bone Arrow 4 long-range attacks, the Crow 4 scouting in the sky, and the Skeleton Acceleration spell to increase the speed and attack speed of the skeletons, it would indeed cause a lot of trouble for the enemy. To Ron, hunting had become much easier. He was one step closer to taking revenge for his grandfather. The dark forest was extremely quiet in the afternoon. Although it still looked as sinister as before, the occasional chirping of birds brought a trace of life to the dark forest as the sun shone through the forest. Ron supported his chin with one hand and sat cross-legged on a large green rock. In front of him was a gurgling stream. His eyes were half closed, as if he was sleeping, but also as if he was thinking. He was experiencing the true meaning of necromancy magic, Crow. Every spell and every battle skill needed to be learned and mastered. Necromancy magic was no exception. Knowing how to cast it and being able to cast it were 2 completely different things. Being able to cast it and being proficient in it were also 2 completely different things. Ron was currently in the process of learning. A gentle wind blew past, rolling up the fallen leaves. The late autumn wind already made people feel a slight chill. After a long silence, Ron suddenly opened his eyes and stood up. He took a deep breath and clasped his hands together. He silently chanted an incantation, and a large amount of soul force was mobilized through his will. Not long after, layers of black gas floated above his palm. The black gas gradually condensed and turned into a small black sphere. The sphere continued to expand and gradually took shape, a sharp beak, 2 small wings, and bright red claws below the sphere. A lifelike crow appeared in Ron's palm. It shook its head and flapped its 2 pitch-black wings, as if it wanted to struggle out of Ron's palm. It looked no different from a real crow. Necromancy magic, Crow. There was no joy on Ron's face. He calmly looked at the bird in his hand. It was really hard to say whether this necromancy magic would succeed or not. Just the appearance alone was useless. He had already failed many times. Crow, as a scouting necromancy magic, would be linked with the soul of the summoner. Just like the eyes of a necromancer, one could see through the crow's eyes and observe every movement in the surroundings. Whether or not we can succeed this time depends on you, Ron muttered to himself. He let go of his hand, and the crow flew into the sky with a flutter, piercing straight into the clouds. Ron spread out his soul force and sensed everything in the surroundings. Ron suddenly cried out in pleasant surprise. He saw it, he really saw it. Tall mountains, small rivers, passing through the sky above the dark forest. Brilliant sunlight shone down, making people feel warm and comfortable. He also saw all kinds of animals and wild beasts living in the dark forest. Ron greedily looked at everything, enjoying the beautiful dark forest to his heart's content. Ron, who was linked with the crow's soul, felt as if he was a bird flying in the sky. The crow flew higher and higher, further and further away. Suddenly, Ron felt his vision darken. He lost his connection with the crow and returned to the scenery in front of him. "Come back!" Ron made a prompt decision and ordered the crow to fly back and stop on a big tree. "I understand. So there is a limit to the connection between my soul and the crow. After this limit, I will lose the connection and I will not be able to see anything," Ron said to himself. "Goo! Goo! Goo!" At this moment, Ron's stomach grumbled. "It can't be? I'm hungry already?" Ron was puzzled. Didn't I just eat something? What Ron didn't know was that 3 days had passed while he was sitting and training. In other words, in these 3 days, Ron had not eaten a single grain of rice. No wonder he was hungry. "Whatever, since I'm hungry, I'll go find something to eat," Ron thought. Not long later, through the crow's eyes, he saw a long-tusked wild boar hiding in the bushes far away. The crow flew in the sky, so the creatures on the ground had nowhere to hide. A smile appeared on Ron's face. "O great god of death, let your anger turn into an arrow and pierce my enemy," Ron waved his hands. His soul force was extracted bit by bit and slowly condensed into an arrow. Not long after, an arrow made of white bones appeared in his hands. The bone arrow in Ron's hands was about 70 centimeters long. At the tip was a heavy rhombus-shaped arrowhead. The tip of the arrowhead flashed with a cold light that made people's hearts palpitate. At the end of the arrowhead were rows of small bone spurs, forming the shape of a tail feather. This was necromancy magic. Bone arrow. "Let me see how powerful this is." Ron was full of confidence against a level 3 wild beast, the long-tusked wild boar. In the past, when he met the long-tusked wild boar alone, he had no advantage at all. Sometimes, he was even chased by the long-tusked wild boar. But now that his strength had increased, Ron felt that the long-tusked wild boar was no longer a threat. "Go!" Ron swung and the bone arrow in his hands flew out. Without a sound, it went straight for the long-tusked wild boar. Ron was now standing close to 100 meters away from the long-tusked wild boar. For some reason, Ron felt that this bone arrow would definitely hit it. Tisk, indeed, the bone arrow pierced deeply into the long-tusked wild boar's body, almost to the hilt. Ron was also shocked. The power of this bone arrow was a bit too fierce. If he had used bone spurs, he wouldn't have been able to pierce through the thick, hard skin on the long-tusked wild boar's back at such a distance. "Aolo!" the long-tusked wild boar cried out in pain. It turned around and saw Ron. Immediately, its eyes turned red and it rushed over like a bull. If it was the Ron of the past, he could only flee in defeat when faced with the enraged long-tusked wild boar. But now, he was incomparably calm. Ron was not in a hurry. His hands constantly formed hand signs and he muttered something. Not long after, 5 skeletal warriors scrambled to climb out from the ground and pounced on the long-tusked wild boar. Bang! A loud sound was heard. The long-tusked wild boar rushed over and smashed the skeletal warriors in front of it into pieces. The skeletal warriors were as weak as dregs in front of it and fell apart in an instant. In the blink of an eye, one of the 5 skeletal warriors was destroyed. Ron was still not in a hurry. He raised his hand and the black gas in his palm gradually condensed. Looking at the long-tusked wild boar rushing over, his eyes flashed with a trace of light. Chapter 28. At this time, a faint light appeared on the summoned skeleton warriors. As the light flashed, the skeleton warriors' speed suddenly doubled. With the blessing of skeleton acceleration, not only did the skeleton warriors' body speed increase, but even the attack speed of the weapons in their hands was much faster. The 4 skeleton warriors seemed to be equipped with accelerators. They turned into 4 phantoms and pounced on the tusked wild boar. The strength of each skeleton warrior had reached the strength of an intermediate novice cultivator with the help of the skeleton acceleration spell. The 4 skeleton warriors that had been buffed with skeleton haste seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. Their attack power more than doubled compared to before. Not long after, the tusked boar was killed and dismembered by the 4 skeleton warriors. It's so easy. Now I can eat pork every day. Ron smiled and thought of the days when he was always chased by the level 3 long-toothed boar. Now it seemed that those days were gone forever. Although they were both level 3 beasts, the poison arrow frog and the long-toothed boar's combat power were different. The latter's combat power was much higher than the former's. Ron smiled and walked over. He held a small bone spur in his hand and easily inserted it into the thick skin of the boar. After a while, the skin of the boar was turned over, revealing the fresh pork inside. In the Cathedral of Gold's Higher Town, in the study of Father Arian, a person was anxiously pacing back and forth. Father Arian's study was full of elegance. On the table next to the desk, there was a cup of fragrant tea served by a maid, but this person was not in the mood to taste it. That person was the owner of Manor Naka, Gerard. He frowned and looked worried. At this time, the door opened, and Arian's figure wearing a black priest's robe appeared outside. "Hey, I was wondering who it was. It turned out to be you, Gerard. We meet again." Arian smiled and greeted. At this moment, he seemed to be in a good mood. "Sir Priest," Gerard saw Father Arian, a pornographic novel. Immediately, as if he had seen his savior, he rushed forward with a pleading look on his face. "Father, save me, oh, God Guangming." Arian was even more surprised when he saw Gelat's face. He even forgot about his previous unhappiness and asked, "Oh, dear Gelat, what happened to you?" Geralt's current appearance was indeed very miserable. His hair was messy, his eyes were lifeless, and there was a pair of big black bags under his eyelid. He looked listless. He was like a completely different person compared to before. Ever since the mission with the beautiful knight had failed, Geralt had become even more alarmed and anxious. What did the failure of the mission with the silver-winged Pegasus mean? This meant that the 15-year-old boy had already surpassed the strength of an elite knight. Such strength was rarely seen in Randolph City, let alone Gold's Higher Town. Most importantly, in front of such a powerhouse, Manor Naka could not resist at all. He kept thinking about this question in his mind. What if the other party comes for revenge? From the beginning, there was a misunderstanding and enmity. Later on, the conflict intensified. Now that he suddenly discovered the other party's strength, how could Geralt not tremble with fear? Among other things, Gerard had also tried his best. He wrote a letter to the Salter family, hoping that they could help him on this matter on account of the fact that they were relatives. With the Salter family's ability, as long as they sent someone powerful, it would be enough to solve this problem. However, the result was disappointing. Not only did the Salter family not send a powerhouse to help him solve the problem, the patriarch even wrote back to reprimand him, saying that he was scared out of his wits by a useless necromancer. Most importantly, the Salter family did not believe that a necromancer could bring any trouble to Manor Naka. However, at the end of the letter, the patriarch still pointed out a way, which was to find the local holy church to solve the problem. Geralt had no choice but to bite the bullet and find Father Arian again. "Father, if you don't save me this time, I will really die," Geralt said with a sobbing tone and knelt down. Geralt's attitude also surprised Father Arian. "God Guangming above, what the hell is going on?" Geralt did not hide anything from Father Arian. He told him the cause and effect of the matter. Of course, he skipped over his own mistakes. "You mean, what happened to the necromancer last time is true?" Father Arian looked dignified and stared at Geralt. "It's true, Father. I dare not hide it from you. Not to mention others, many townspeople in Maple Leaf Town saw it," Geralt said in frustration. "If the townspeople saw it, then it should be true." Father Arian had a strange look on his face, but then he smiled. "But you don't have to worry too much. As far as I know, the so-called undead magic is just a legend. It doesn't have any attack power at all. Although there are many skeletons, as long as you are a trainee, you can easily deal with them." "No, Father Arian." Geralt shook his head and then told him about the temporary mission. He also emphasized that the mercenary who took the temporary mission was an advanced knight. Arian frowned when he heard this. He thought that Geralt was exaggerating. How could an elite knight not be able to deal with a necromancer and even be defeated? How was that possible? But seeing Geralt's serious look, Father Arian did not intend to argue with him on this issue. For him, it was the duty of the Holy See to destroy the evil forces. Whether Geralt was telling the truth or not, the necromancer must be destroyed in the end. Father Arian thought for a moment and comforted him. "In that case, you don't have to worry. I will send the Holy See guards out tomorrow to find Ron and destroy him. If he is really a necromancer. At the same time, I will report to the Holy See and see how they deal with it." Geralt was overjoyed when he heard this and immediately thanked him. Father Arian's statement represented the attitude of the local Holy Church. It also meant that the Holy See was involved in this matter. "This time, Ron won't be able to escape even if he has wings," Gerard thought to himself. The heavy expression on his face was swept away, revealing a relaxed expression. The Holy See guards mentioned by Father Arian were one of the guards of the Holy See's churches. Although they were called guards, in fact, their equipment and training were better than the regular army of the Holy Roman Empire. They were responsible for maintaining the security of the churches of the Holy See and eliminating heretics and evil forces. At the same time, they also carried out various tasks issued by the Holy See. And this time, the task was to capture the heretics, necromancers. This was their specialty. Geralt was completely relieved. His face was filled with a humble smile. "God Guangming above, Father, the task of capturing heretics is not easy." As he said this, he took out a heavy bag from his arms and handed it over. Father Arian's eyes lit up and a knowing smile appeared on his face. He calmly put the bag away and said, "It's nothing. Of course not. We are under the orders of the God of Light. It is the duty of the Holy Church to exterminate the heretics." The Arian priest's face was filled with love. "God loves the world. Child, every noble life is worthy of our protection. God loves the world." Of course, this did not include heretic. West of the Holy Roman Empire, dark forest. A crow flew by and stopped on a treetop. It kept swinging its head while its eyes were closed, observing the surrounding movements. Under the tree there was a shadow cat. It was eating something in its claws. It was a 3-pound mountain rat. At the same time, it was vigilantly looking around. This shadow cat was an agile beast. Its speed was so fast that ordinary people would not be able to catch it. Its claws could even easily slit their throat. Although the shadow cat was very vigilant, it did not know that it was being watched. The bird, or to be exact, the crow, was watching its every move. The vigilant shadow cat naturally saw the bird, but it did not think that the bird would cause it any harm. Ron stayed in the bushes, not daring to breathe. He was afraid that he would be discovered by the shadow cat. Perhaps with his strength, he would not be afraid of a shadow cat. However, if it attacked first, he would be in trouble. He stealthily moved to a suitable position. The shadow cat still did not notice. At this time, Ron moved. He waved his hand and 3 bone arrows silently pierced the shadow cat's back. The bone arrows were very fast, and the angle was very tricky. One of them directly stuck to the ground. Bang! 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 The 3 bone spikes pierced into the shadow cat's flesh. The shadow cat did not even have time to cry out before it fell to the ground. Its claws twitched a few times before it stopped breathing. Phew! Done. That was easy. Ron raised his head and wiped the sweat off his forehead. He had easily killed a level 3 beast. Even a practitioner of the same level as him would not have been able to do it so easily. Ron had indeed improved. He was even able to control the bone arrows, a mid-level novice spell, with greater ease. At this time, he could already control 3 bone arrows. To a practitioner of the same level as him, 3 bone arrows were already a great threat. Of course, this was also thanks to the necromancy magic that Homelin had taught him. Without this magic, he would not have been able to predict the enemy's movements and make a move before the enemy. Ron smiled as he walked over. He placed the dead shadow cat's body into the basket on his back. When he returned home at night, he would be able to eat it. Chapter 29. What's that? The crow flew up, and Ron saw an animal through its eyes. It was biting something with its head lowered. Wolf. A black wolf. It was biting an 8-horned antelope that it had just caught, and from time to time it would let out a low growl. Hee, so it's a tier 3 black wolf. Ron laughed. He had his eyes set on this black wolf. This fur is really not bad. It's cold now, so it's quite suitable to make a robe. Ron had killed a tier 3 black wolf before, but he didn't expect that this black wolf would be dismembered by the skeletal warriors. His wish to obtain the wolf's fur had fallen through, and now that he had another chance, he couldn't let it go. Once he made up his mind, Ron crept closer to the black wolf. At the same time, the crow flew up, circled around, and landed on a tree branch, quietly observing its every move. Other than its sharp claws and dazzling speed, this tier 3 black wolf didn't have any other redeeming qualities. Ron felt that it was very easy to deal with such a creature. Heh, you're dead this time. Watch me. Ron's lips curled into a smile. At this moment, he was in the best position to ambush. He could even see the scene of this black wolf being hit by his bone arrow and howling as it fell. However, Ron's wishful thinking was wrong. He wasn't targeting a tier 3 black wolf, but a tier 4 exotic beast, the crimson firewolf. Exotic beasts were different from ordinary wild beasts. They belonged to the ranks of magical beasts. Ordinary wild beasts didn't have magical powers, but exotic beasts did. But the strange thing was that exotic beasts were both magical beasts and not magical beasts. It was said that a long time ago, there were no such creatures as exotic beasts in this world. Until one day, when the gates of hell opened and released large amounts of magical energy, magical beasts that were tainted by the magical energy immediately mutated. After mutating, magical beasts lost their intelligence. As long as they were living creatures, they would attack. Their strength was as strong as magical beasts, or even stronger. Moreover, they were extremely crazy in battle. They were exotic beasts. The most terrifying thing was that these mutated magical beasts were not only powerful, but their reproductive ability had also doubled, and the pregnancy time had been shortened by 2 times. Due to their continuous reproduction, the number of exotic beasts was simply too high. Think about it, a mother mouse could give birth to 10 litters of exotic beasts every year, giving birth to 6 to 8 babies each time. What kind of concept was that? The consequences of this mutation are catastrophic. Fortunately, magical beasts didn't have a strong reproductive ability. Many magical beasts only had a slight increase in their reproductive ability after becoming exotic beasts, unlike ordinary rats. Exotic beasts and magical beasts looked slightly different on the surface, but the biggest difference between them was their intelligence. Magical beasts generally had their own intelligence, and some powerful magical beasts could even speak human language. As for the strange beasts, no one could tell what they were. They looked like magical beasts, but they didn't have intelligence. They formed a group of their own and kept reproducing. Without intelligence, it was as if they were born to kill. Even though they were both exotic beasts, they kept killing each other. It was also because of this that the strange beasts that killed each other didn't cause a disaster for humans. If all the strange beasts in the Noah continent stopped killing each other and worked together to deal with other creatures, there wouldn't be any humans left in the continent. At this moment, the crimson fire wolf suddenly raised its head and sniffed the air. Following that, its gaze turned sharp, and a pair of blood-red eyes stared at the crow not far away. Exotic beasts were still magical beasts. Although they had lost their minds, they were still magical beasts by nature. Their alertness wasn't low at all. Instinctively, it sensed danger. A faint murderous aura appeared on the crow's body, making it feel extremely uncomfortable. "Awoo!" The crimson fire wolf suddenly howled, and opened its mouth to spit out a fireball. The fireball was like a cannonball, flying straight towards the crow. The fire burned fiercely. The crow couldn't dodge in time, and was burned to ashes by the explosion of the fireball. It turned into a cloud of black gas and dissipated in the air. "I've been discovered." Ron's heart suddenly tightened. He wanted to sneak attack the black wolf, but he didn't expect it to counterattack. What made him even more surprised was that the black wolf actually spat out a fireball. Is this still a black wolf? It's a magician. At this moment, the crimson fire wolf also turned its head, and Ron was stunned for a moment. Its body was twice the size of the black wolf. It had a glossy black fur, long and sharp fangs, and a long tongue that was constantly dripping with sparkling blood. Its blood-red eyes revealed a bloodthirsty and frenzied look. No, this isn't a black wolf. Ron also knew that he had made a mistake. The animal in front of him was obviously much stronger than a rank 3 black wolf. The crimson fire wolf also discovered Ron. It roared and continuously approached Ron. Every time the crimson fire wolf took a step forward, Ron took a step back. His clothes were already drenched in cold sweat. The crimson fire wolf was only 10 meters away from him. What is this thing? Being stared at by this unknown giant wolf, Ron's cold sweat flowed down his face. His face revealed a terrified expression. Instinctively, Ron felt that this giant wolf in front of him was extremely dangerous. No matter what, let's go all out first. At this moment, Ron's eyes also revealed a trace of ruthlessness. Ron silently chanted a magic incantation. Both of his hands stretched out in the shape of the Chinese character. His soul energy seemed to have received an order and crazily revolved. This soul energy turned into wisps of black gas, seeping out from Ron's hands and drifting in all directions. "Awoo!" The giant black wolf howled and stamped on the ground with its hind paws. A few deep claw marks appeared on the black soil. It was like a cannonball that went straight for Ron. A crazy killing intent rushed towards him. Ron could only feel his heart trembling. At this moment, Ron also completed his summoning. Necromancy magic. Skeleton summoning technique. The ground under Ron's feet condensed like ice crystals. The black soil faintly emitted a green glow. Not long after, the skeleton warriors stood in front of Ron in an orderly manner as if they had received an order. "Kill! Kill it for me!" At this moment, Ron also recklessly roared. At the same time, more than one bone arrow appeared in his hand. The pitch-black bone arrow floated in the air, emitting a trace of strange light. The skeleton warriors roared and pounced forward. The bone blades in their hands were raised high. They were like a well-trained army, surrounding the crimson firewolf from different angles. Morale was high as they pressed forward. There was no fear in the skeleton warriors' eyes. They only knew how to charge and charge again. The sharp bone blades slashed the giant black wolf's body. Fresh blood spurted out. The crimson fire wolf let out a miserable cry. Being able to dodge the attack of one skeleton warrior did not mean that it could dodge the attacks of all of them. Its body was dripping with blood. However, the skeleton warriors also suffered losses. 3 of them were smashed into pieces by the Crimson Firewolf's attack. At this moment, Ron made his move. A few bone spikes attacked the Crimson Firewolf from different angles. The attack pattern was exactly the same as when he killed the Shadow Cat. Bang! 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 The bone arrows were extremely fast. At such a close distance, the Crimson Firewolf was unable to dodge at all. It hit. Ron's heart almost jumped out of his body. He seemed to have seen the dawn of victory. However, it was too early for him to be happy. The Crimson Firewolf, who had suffered a loss, became even more frenzied. It howled madly and its body suddenly erupted with blazing flames. In an instant, the bone arrows that were deeply embedded in its body disappeared, turning into powder and disappearing into the air. What? Ron was shocked. However, what happened next made him even more terrified. The Crimson Firewolf took in a deep breath. Following that, a blazing pillar of fire shot out without any warning. The skeleton warriors in front of Ron were quickly caught in the crossfire. Even though Ron was slightly further away, he was still affected. The skeleton warriors burned with raging flames, emitting crackling sounds. Not long after, all of the skeleton warriors fell to the ground, turning into black gas and disappearing. Damn, it can't be. At this moment, Ron finally understood one thing. He had encountered an extremely powerful existence, and this existence was something that he could not afford to offend. Run. This was the only thought in Ron's mind. He no longer hesitated and turned to run. How could the enraged Crimson Firewolf let a prey escape? It spread out its 4 flaming claws and chased after Ron. Not long after, it was only 3 to 4 meters away from Ron. Not good. It caught up. Ron was extremely flustered. At this moment, he did not know what to do. However, at this moment, the Crimson Firewolf roared and spat out a pillar of fire, intending to burn Ron to ashes. Bone Shield. At this critical moment, Ron did not forget Homeland's teachings. He released his only defensive necromancy magic to protect himself. Ron only felt a heat on his back, as if he was in hell. The intense burning sensation caused him to cry out in pain. The pillar of fire behind him released an extremely powerful force, pushing Ron's small body forward by more than 10 meters, increasing the distance between him and the Crimson Firewolf. The bone shield that had just been summoned had completed its glorious mission and disappeared into the air. It hurts, Ron staggered as he got up. He only felt a burning sensation on his back, as if he had lost all feeling. He secretly rejoiced in his heart. Luckily, the bone shield blocked the attack, otherwise he would have become a roasted pig. The Crimson Firewolf was vexed. It did not expect that it would cause it to be even further away from its prey. Without thinking, it pounced forward again. Go, hold it back for me. Ron made a prompt decision. He immediately summoned a few skeletal warriors to block in front of the Crimson Firewolf, while he sped up and ran backwards. Unfortunately, the skeletal warriors only managed to delay him for a few minutes. The frail skeletal warriors could not stop the berserk Crimson Firewolf at all. After dealing with the skeletal warriors, the Crimson Firewolf immediately roared and pounced forward. 4 legs cannot outrun 2 legs. Not long after, it caught up to Ron again. What do I do? What do I do? Ron was anxious. He ran with all his might, but the distance between him and the Crimson Firewolf was getting shorter and shorter. There were a few times when the wolf even brushed against his clothes. Ron's heart was pounding nonstop. The Crimson Firewolf had also learned its lesson. It no longer breathed fire and instead planned to use its sharp claws to tear this human into pieces. Just as Ron was in despair, an idea suddenly flashed through his mind. I've got it! Ron thought of a brilliant idea. Skeletal Acceleration Spell. He used the Skeletal Acceleration spell on the skeletal warriors and had them stall the angry giant wolf. When the giant wolf was entangled with the skeletal warriors, Ron quickly jumped onto the back of one of the skeletal warriors. Go, go, go quickly, Ron anxiously shouted. Chapter 30. Is it gone yet? Ron had already run far away, but he was still in a state of shock. After thinking for a while, he decided to release the crow to take a look. Ron silently chanted an incantation, and not long after, a lifelike black bird appeared in his hand. He lightly tossed the crow into the air. It's not here, looks like it's gone. Ron searched carefully, but did not find the giant wolf's figure. Just as he was rejoicing, a fireball flew out from the forest like a cannonball, instantly smashing the crow into pieces. Ron's vision became pitch black again. Following the crow's appearance, the crimson fire wolf quickly found Ron. Its blood-red eyes stared at him and fiercely pounced on him. Damn it, I've been discovered again! The crimson fire wolf's angry roar sounded again. Ron knew that he was no match for it, so he could only escape. Just like this, one man and one wolf were entangled for a long time. Ron was no match for it, but the crimson fire wolf was also unable to catch up to Ron, who was buffed by the skeleton acceleration spell. It was not that Ron had not fought before, but all of his necromancy magic was ineffective in front of that terrifying giant wolf. The bone spike was too close. Ron did not want to take the risk. The bone arrow had enough range, but unfortunately, its lethality was not enough to kill that guy. The skeleton warrior was burned to ashes by the giant wolf's flames. Even if it was buffed by the skeleton acceleration spell, it was no exception. Pornographic novels. As for the crow and bone shield, they did not have any attack power, they could only protect themselves. Ron was completely at his wits' end. Caw, 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 from the depths of the forest, a skeleton-like thing walked over from afar. It was wearing simple armor, and its bony feet made a crisp sound as it stepped on the ground. This skeleton warrior did not carry any weapons, because it was carrying a person on its back. Ron rode on the skeleton warrior's back, vigilantly looking around. The 3 crows he released flew back and forth in the sky, guarding the surroundings. I've finally escaped. Seeing that the giant wolf didn't chase after him this time, Ron breathed a sigh of relief. However, he was puzzled in his heart. What was this thing that was so powerful? Not only did it have a body stronger than the tusked wild boar, it could also release fire magic. Fire magic, wait a minute. Could it be to be able to release magic and have an extremely strong physical body? Could it be a legendary beast? Ron had heard from Homelin that these strange beasts were extremely powerful creatures. These strange beasts were bloodthirsty and crazy, so he had to be careful when encountering them. If it's really an exotic beast, it's indeed not bad to be able to escape with my life. Ron sighed inwardly at his good luck. Even the weakest exotic beast was at the 4th level, which was equivalent to a primary cultivator's strength. With Ron's current strength as a primary cultivator, he was indeed extremely lucky to be able to escape with his life from the claws of a 4th-level magical beast. Thinking of the terror of that exotic beast just now, Ron's heart thumped. However, in the confrontation just now, Ron also discovered the range of this exotic beast's activity. As long as he didn't enter its territory, he would be fine. As long as he did, he would be mercilessly attacked by this exotic beast. This guy is really too strong. Is this the strength of an exotic beast? Thinking of the dangerous situation just now, Ron's heart still had lingering fear. If he hadn't suddenly thought of sitting on the skeleton warrior with the skeleton acceleration spell to escape, he might have already lost his life. No. That's not right. Ron shook his head and muttered to himself, strength is relative. It's not that this exotic beast is too strong, it's that my strength is too weak. If it was Grandpa Homelin, eliminating this exotic beast wouldn't take much effort at all. If I can't even deal with an exotic beast, how can I take revenge for Grandpa? Ron clenched his fists, a resolute look in his eyes. Primary professional. Grandpa Homelin said that as long as I become a primary professional, I can take revenge for Grandpa. Primary professional referred to the primary stage of necromancers, which was also the primary stage of necromancers. According to Noah Continent's classification of strength, necromancers were the same as mages and swordsmen, belonging to the soldier level. Above that was the master level, and above that was the master level, or even the legendary powerhouses of the sacred domain. Using the mage profession as an example, it could be divided into magic apprentice, mage, archmage, grand magus. Sacred magus warriors could be divided into apprentice swordsman, swordmaster, great swordmaster, sacred swordmaster. Although Ron's necromancer profession was slightly different, the division of strength was the same. Apprentice necromancer, archmage necromancer, grand magus necromancer, sacred magus necromancer. Every profession was divided into 3 stages: primary, intermediate, and advanced. The strength of each stage was much higher than the next. Through cultivation, ordinary people could generally reach the level of a professional, which was the strength of a soldier. Those who could reach the level of a master were already rare geniuses. Those who could reach the level of a master were the best of the geniuses. As for those who could reach the legendary level of a sanctuary, they were even more unique. It was unknown how many millions of people there were who could reach the level of such a genius. The powerhouses of the sacred domain were already the pinnacle of the human world. Right now, Ron's strength was at the level of an apprentice necromancer. Don't look at how he killed level 3 beasts as easily as chopping melons and vegetables. His strength was only a little stronger than ordinary people. If he encountered a level 4 exotic beast, the lowest level of exotic beast was level 4, or other professionals, Ron would undoubtedly lose. Ron knew that there was still a long way to go from an apprentice necromancer to a primary necromancer. Another 2 months passed. Cold winds blew and snow swirled in the air. The Noah continent entered its winter season. The dark forest was also covered in a layer of white, and many leaves had fallen. When the weather was clear, the sunlight could penetrate through the trees and penetrate into the forest. However, even with the arrival of winter, some tall trees were still flourishing with leaves, crisp and clear. In the thatched hut on the tree, Ron was sitting upright. His body was covered in a thick animal skin, and his hair was messy. He hadn't shaved for several months, looking like a savage. In front of him were a few wild fruits that he hadn't finished eating, but he hadn't touched them. The simple treehouse couldn't block the cold wind blowing from outside. Even with the warm animal skin, Ron was still shivering inside. In these 2 months, Ron had been staying in the treehouse. Other than looking for some wild fruits, he almost didn't take a step out. He even went out to hunt less. All his time was spent on cultivation. He had to work hard to improve his strength. And this day had finally come. Ron's body was surrounded by a faint black fog, making people feel that it was unreal. In these few days, he faintly felt a trace of a breakthrough, but this feeling was extremely ethereal, as if there was a layer of barrier in front of him. Ron felt that as long as he broke through this layer of barrier, his strength would rise to another level. Ron entered his knowledge sea. His knowledge sea was boundless, and there was a hazy feeling of chaos. At this time, Ron discovered that his soul was clearly visible. At the same time, he was surprised to find that the soul in his knowledge sea was more than twice as strong as before. Just like last time, Ron's soul was trapped in a black ball of light. The black ball of light was filled with soul force, and it was obvious that this ball of light could no longer hold so much soul force. So as long as this ball of light is broken, my strength will rise to another level. Ron's face revealed a thoughtful expression. He had indeed guessed correctly. Soul force was like water, and that ball of light was like a cup. As one's cultivation increased, the amount of soul force would increase. When the water was full, the cup would no longer be able to hold so much water, and the cup would burst. Then, more soul force would be poured into a new cup, until the new cup reached its limit and broke through again. The current situation was that Ron's soul force had already reached its limit, and he was just short of a final breakthrough. This barrier was like a layer of membrane, blocking Ron's hope of breaking through. Concentrate all my soul force in one point, and then quickly break through the barrier, Ron made up his mind. A large amount of soul force was constantly concentrated in one direction. He wanted to break through this barrier. Boom, 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 traces of soul force were constantly attacking the black ball of light. Ron felt waves of tremors in his knowledge sea, as if there was an intense battle. Although the black ball of light was being attacked by soul force, it still didn't budge. Damn it! I'm always just a little bit away, Ron was vexed, but his heart was ruthless, and his eyes were scarlet red. I don't care, I'll attack until this barrier breaks. The attacks continued, and in Ron's knowledge sea, a deafening sound was heard. Ron could also see that this barrier wasn't so easy to break through. Gradually, Ron felt that the strength of his skin was exhausted. Looking from the outside, in the cold weather, his forehead was oozing with fine beads of sweat, and his head was emitting traces of steam. Finally, in the black ball of light, a fine crack appeared. Done! Seeing this, Ron's spirit was greatly shaken. At the same time, he frantically mobilized all his soul force, and violently surged towards that fine crack. Boom! A sound was heard. A large amount of soul force rushed towards the crack, and like a river bursting its banks, the black ball of light finally shattered. Ron only felt a buzzing sound in his mind, and an extremely powerful soul force spread in all directions, all the way to his four limbs. His entire body was instantly filled with a comfortable feeling, and every pore was filled with joy. The black gas outside Ron's body suddenly increased greatly, filling the entire room. He almost couldn't control it, and his soul force overflowed outside the room. Chapter 31. Junior Necromancer. In a short 5 months, Ron had broken through to Junior Necromancer trainee. This was extremely rare even in the history of necromancers. My soul's strength actually increased by so much? Every breakthrough brought Ron endless surprises, and this time was no exception. The enormous soul's strength made him wild with joy. Let's see what new necromancy magic Grandpa Homelin left for me. Such a thought flashed through Ron's mind. Just like last time, he could learn new necromancy magic with every breakthrough. Ron's spiritual sense entered the ring. Everything was as usual. Ron entered the undead castle, and walked in front of the stone tablet. With a light touch of his hand, a powerful ray of light entered his mind. Not long after, Ron withdrew his spiritual sense. He sat on the ground and quietly digested the necromancy magic he had just learned. Becoming a novice necromancer was equivalent to raising his strength by an entire level. His strength also rose along with it, and the necromancy magic he learned was completely different. Summon skeleton warriors. Skeleton warriors are even more powerful than skeleton warriors. They wear heavy armor, hold a shield in one hand, and a one-handed axe in the other. Their attack and defense are on a whole new level. Bone prison. Summon a cage made of bones. It's not sturdy and is used to restrict the enemy's movements. Bone spear. Summon a powerful bone spear to attack the enemy. Walking out of the door, the world was covered in white. Snow had started falling at some point. Ron shrunk his head from the cold. He couldn't help but rub his hands and smile bitterly. It's already been 2 months, and it's already snowing. This damned weather. Every winter was the saddest time for Ron, and this year was no exception. The cold air seemed to want to drill into his body, and it was rushing straight. No, I can't stay in the tree anymore. I have to find a cave. Moreover, I have to find some food. Treehouse. Summer and autumn were fine, but if you stayed in the tree during winter, you would definitely freeze to death. Ron packed his things. He didn't have much, so he wrapped them into a bag and jumped to the ground. Ron looked around the treehouse that he had stayed in for a few months before leaving on the back of the skeletal warrior. It was not easy to find food in the winter, so all the wild beasts were basically extinct. Ron controlled the crow to fly a few rounds, but he did not see a single wild beast. Usually, at this time, there would definitely be a lot of pheasants and rabbits, but now there was not a single one. Just as Ron was worrying about finding food, a familiar figure appeared in his line of sight. Crimson Fire Wolf. Unknowingly, the Crimson Fire Wolf appeared not far in front of Ron. Its pair of evil and crazy eyes stared fiercely at him. It turned out that he had unknowingly stepped into the territory of the Crimson Fire Wolf. Is it that exotic beast? Ron frowned. Due to the great increase in his strength, there was not much fear in his heart. When enemies meet, their eyes are exceptionally red. At this moment, Ron's eyes shone brightly. He smiled and licked his lips. Since you delivered yourself to my doorstep, then I won't hold back. This time, you will become my food. The Crimson Fire Wolf had actually discovered Ron long ago. However, what made it puzzled was that in a short 2 months, this human's strength seemed to have increased by quite a bit. This was also the reason why it had been hesitating. At this moment, Ron was already prepared for battle. A smile appeared on his face. You came at the right time. I'll let you have a taste of my new magic. Ron chanted an incantation, and not long after, 5 skeleton warriors appeared in front of him, just like soldiers standing guard. These are the skeletal warriors? Ron took a closer look and quickly saw the difference between the skeletal warriors and the skeletal warriors. The skeletons that appeared in front of Ron were covered in thick armor. Their weapons had also changed. They held a bone axe in one hand and a huge shield that could cover half their body in the other. They looked much more powerful than the skeletal warriors that held bone swords. Ron's eyes shone with a cold light. He softly said, "Kill! Roar!" The exotic beast Crimson Fire Wolf roared and spat out a fireball. Boom! A loud sound rang out. The skeletal warrior raised its shield to block. The blazing fireball caused the skeletal warrior to take a step back. Half of its body was charred black, but miraculously, it did not collapse. He blocked it. He actually blocked it. Seeing this scene, Ron was overjoyed. He slapped the head of the skeleton he was riding and shouted, Go beat it up! The skeletal warriors that had been buffed with the skeletal acceleration spell pounced on the Crimson Fire Wolf like wolves and tigers. They raised the bone axes in their hands high and fiercely hacked at the Crimson Fire Wolf. Roar! A deep wound immediately appeared on the Crimson Fire Wolf's back. The Crimson Fire Wolf was also enraged. It pounced on the skeletal warrior in front of it and tore it to pieces. Skeletal recovery spell. Ron chanted an incantation. The injured skeletal warriors stood up shakily and once again entered the battle. No way, skeletal recovery spell used up so much of my soul energy? Ron only discovered that more than half of his soul energy had been used up after using skeletal recovery spell. It seemed that he could not use this spell casually. The higher the rank of the skeleton, the greater the cost of using skeletal recovery spell. I have to control my usage. Ron quickly came to a conclusion. When he had just advanced, he felt that his soul energy was inexhaustible. But now it seemed that it was not enough. At this time, the Crimson Fire Wolf was trapped. The skeletal warriors surrounded it and attacked it. The wounds on its body rapidly increased, but none of its vitals were injured. However, Ron's side was not having a good time either. 2 of the 5 skeletal warriors had been killed, and only 3 were barely able to trap the Crimson Fire Wolf. I can't drag this out any longer. I have to end the battle as soon as possible. Ron chanted an incantation and cast a new necromancy spell, a bone spear, that was almost a meter long appeared in his hand. Bone Spear was a single-target offensive spell commonly used by necromancers. In terms of attack power, it was much stronger than Bone Arrow or Bone Spike. "Go!" Ron shouted loudly. The Bone Spear in his hand flew out as if it was being thrown, flying directly towards the Crimson Firewolf. The sharp Bone Spear flashed with a cold light and pierced through the Crimson Firewolf's pointy ear, causing blood to spurt out. It missed. Ron couldn't help but feel that it was a pity. This Bone Spear was originally aimed at the Crimson Firewolf's head. The Crimson Firewolf howled in grief and turned to run. Even as crazy as a beast, it understood that it was not a match for its opponent. Its beastly instincts made it run away with its tail between its legs. "Heh, want to run? No way, Bone Prison." Ron chanted an incantation and summoned the Bone Prison, intending to trap the Crimson Firewolf, just like what Homeland's grandfather did. However, the Bone Prison didn't appear. Ugh, Ron knew that his summoning spell had failed. He wasn't familiar with these new necromancy spells, especially the Bone Prison, which he couldn't summon at all. Ron could only watch as the Crimson Firewolf ran further and further away. How infuriating, I actually let it escape. At this moment, Ron was sitting under a tree, sulking. Actually, that exotic beast, the Crimson Firewolf, was also rank 4, the same level of strength as Ron, a novice necromancer. However, since Ron had just advanced, he wasn't familiar with the new necromancy magic yet. The new necromancy magic, Bone Spear, failed and the Bone Prison wasn't successfully summoned. If the summoning had succeeded, the outcome of the battle would have been different. However, Ron was gratified that his strength had indeed increased greatly. Thinking back to the time when he was chased by that beast, now it was the beast's turn to run away as soon as it saw him. Goo goo! At this moment, Ron's stomach made a sound. In this cold weather, coupled with such an intense battle, it was indeed easy to feel hungry. Heh. Ron smiled and helplessly patted his stomach. My stomach, it's been hard on you. I'll go look for something to eat now." Just as Ron was about to stand up, a soft voice came from the cold wind in front of him. "Someone's here." Ron suddenly became alert and quickly hid under a tree. He knew that the necromancy magic he practiced was strictly forbidden by the Holy See. If he was discovered by the people of the Holy See, he would be burned to death as a heretic. Therefore, Ron had always been very careful. Ron had an idea and a crow appeared in his palm. With a light wave of his hand, the crow flew into the air. On the snowy ground, 3 figures appeared. They wore a full set of white armor with thick cotton clothes underneath. They looked like they were fully armed. The crow perched on a nearby tree and tilted its head, trying its best to pretend to be a bird. At the same time, it quietly observed them. At this moment, Ron's pupils shrank. He saw a cross in the shape of an angel in front of their chests. There from the Holy See, Ron quickly confirmed the other party's identity. He thought for a moment, but what are they doing here? Could it be that they know that I practice necromancy magic? Ron decided to continue watching. With a thought, he let the crow fly closer. The crow, which was formed from the power of the soul, looked like a real bird. It was so beautiful that Ron was not worried about being recognized. Through the crow's eyes and ears, Ron finally heard the content of their conversation. "Damn it, this damn cold weather actually brought us to the dark and pornographic novel? To find someone in the forest." One of the Holy See guards with a long beard scolded fiercely. "Humph, those people from the Holy See don't even treat us as humans." Another bald guard of the Holy See agreed with indignation. He was tall and burly and looked like he understood something. "They only let us suffer in this cold place while they hide in a warm house by the fire. This is too unfair." "Forget it. Who asked us to be at the lowest level of the Holy See? If they don't want to come, we can only do it." Another white-faced youth in a black cloak comforted him. The bald guard of the Holy See slammed the axe in his hand on the ground and roared, I'm not going no matter what. We've been searching here for 3 days and 3 nights. Not to mention a necromancer, we haven't even seen a rabbit. Chapter 32. At this moment, a gust of cold wind blew past the crow. Ron could no longer hear anything, only the sound of the wind. He could only hear the big bald man saying something loudly. His words seemed to be very intense, and the 2 people beside him were constantly comforting him. After a while, the big bald man finally calmed down. At this moment, Ron heard the voice again. Sigh, I don't know why, but the church has reported this matter. The higher-ups seem to be taking this matter very seriously. I heard that they're preparing to send someone here, the big bald man said. The pale-faced young man's face darkened, and he snorted coldly. I've heard about this too. I heard that they've even sent a holy son here. Needless to say, he's here to steal the credit. The Holy Son of the Holy See had a very high status in the Holy See. Every year, the Holy See would select talented young boys and girls from all over the Holy Roman Empire. After training them, they would enter the second round of selection, where the more outstanding ones would be selected as candidates for the Holy Son. After spending a lot of effort to train them, the Holy Son would be selected from the candidates for the Holy Son after the third round of selection. The Holy See was divided into the Temple of the Holy Son and the Temple of the Saintess. Every Holy Son and Saintess had the possibility of inheriting the Pope's position. Therefore, the Holy Son of the Holy See were all extremely talented people. I don't understand. Why would killing a necromancer give such a big credit? Even the Holy Son is coming out to steal the credit. The big bearded guard said in confusion. You should be asking why the Holy See hates necromancers so much that they have to exterminate all necromancers in their territory. But I don't know either. The big bald guard sneered. Now all these necromancers have run to the Roland Empire. I saw a lot of them when I was in the Roland Empire last time. Speaking of which, this necromancer is also unlucky. He could have gone anywhere, but he had to hide in the Holy Roman Empire where necromancy is forbidden. Isn't that asking for death? How many years has it been since a necromancer appeared in our Holy Roman Empire? Isn't this a big credit? That white-faced man laughed and said, I heard that he is only 15 years old. A child who doesn't know anything, who can he blame for his own death? Humph! Ron curled his lips in dissatisfaction. If it wasn't to avenge my grandfather, I would have left the Holy Roman Empire a long time ago. If it wasn't for the high reward, I wouldn't have come to such a cold place. My feet are numb from the cold. Big Head kept stomping his feet and spitting out a white mist from his mouth. Damn it, if I had known that there would be so many rewards, I would have gone to the Roland Empire and captured a necromancer to make up the numbers. It's no use. The pale-faced man shook his head. Don't forget, we have that kid's portrait with us. His name is Ron, no one can impersonate him. At this moment, the bearded man, who had been silent all this time, spoke. He sighed and said, I think the focus of this matter is not on that child. Pornographic novels. Big Bald Head and the pale-faced man looked at him together. The bearded man continued, As far as I know, although Ron's family is poor, he is still a studious child. According to the people in Maple Leaf Town, his dream is to become a magician. With that, he glanced at the pale-faced man. If it wasn't for young Master Chitley of Manor Naka, who accidentally killed his grandfather, and later, Geralt sent people to kill him, if these things didn't happen, maybe Ron wouldn't have embarked on the path of heresy. The bearded man finally said something fair, and Ron secretly nodded. If his grandfather was still alive, maybe he wouldn't have practiced necromancy. But now that things have come to this, there is no turning back. What do you mean? The pale-faced man's face was full of anger, and his voice rose an octave. You mean my Uncle Gerald was wrong? My brother Groot died in vain? The pale-faced man's face turned purple, and his eyes stared fiercely at the bearded man, as if he wanted to eat him up. No. No. The bearded man hurriedly waved his hand, and it was obvious that he was not good with words. I'm just stating facts. F***ck your mother. The white-faced man flew into a rage on the spot. I only know that a few lives in Manor Naka were lost just like that, including my brother Groot. If it weren't for this kid, how could my brother have died? But the bearded man still wanted to say something. No buts, the pale-faced man said coldly. Isn't it just an old beggar with a broken leg? And that damn little bastard too. They are all untouchables, what's the big deal about their deaths? As for you, the pale-faced man pointed at the bearded man and said, if you say such things again, be careful that I don't recognize you. The pale-faced man was aggressive and unforgiving, but the bearded man could not go on. The atmosphere was a little awkward for a while. Forget it. The bald man on the side patted the pale-faced man on the shoulder and said, of course he is on your side. Don't hurt your friendship because of this little thing. This guy has always been so straightforward. The bald man mediated, and the pale-faced man's face eased a little, but he still said coldly, no matter what, I came back to avenge my brother Groot. Whoever stops me is my enemy. After that, he ignored the two and strode away. The bald man and the bearded man looked at each other and had to quickly follow. Ron heard their conversation clearly through the crows in the tree. Well, so you are from Manor Naka, and you are Groot's brother. Ron's heart was filled with murderous intent. He had long hated the people of Manor Naka. If he had not met Grandpa Homelin, he would have died that night. In this world where the strong preyed on the weak, everything was illusory. Only strength was the way of the king. Ron thought that even if Grandpa Zachary didn't exist, he would still practice necromancy magic. Thinking of this, Ron's eyes revealed a deep murderous intent. Since you are heartless, don't blame me for being unjust. Since things have come to this point, there is nothing more to say. Since you came to the dark forest to find me and even kill me, I won't be polite. I even took care of the strange beasts. You bastards are nothing. Ron sneered in his heart, and his figure slowly disappeared into the snowy, white world. The wind blew even more fiercely. Let's look for him again. If we can't find him, then we will go back. The bearded man sighed. The dark forest is full of danger. A 15-year-old child who practices necromancy is trash. I'm afraid he is already dead. What are we looking for? We should go back as soon as possible, the bald man said with a cold snort. He did not have any hope that Ron could survive here. They walked for a long time. After a while, the bald man wiped the snow off his face and said helplessly, it's fine to find him here. Forget it, let's go back. That kid is most likely dead. Well, let's go back. The bearded man also agreed. The pale-faced man did not say anything. At this moment, an arrow was shot from the dark. The bald man cried out and fell to the ground. Not good, someone attacked. The bearded guard of the church was shocked. He pulled out his longsword and stared at the direction where the arrow came from. You? What happened to you? The pale-faced man was also shocked. He quickly went to help the bald man up. Damn it, I got an arrow in my knee, the bald man said while holding his knee. His face was full of pain. Who is shooting people in the dark here? Get out here! The bearded man shouted with a sword in his hand. When his eyes fell on the bald man's knee, his face suddenly changed. The arrow that was shot, it was not an ordinary arrow. It was made of bone. Who is it? Get the hell out here! The bearded church's guard held his sword in his hand, surveying the surroundings as he shouted sternly. The pale-faced man also took out his sword from his space bag and looked around vigilantly. How are you? The bearded man asked the bald man with the sword in his hand. The bald man's face was already twisted in pain. Damn it, which bastard shot me? The bearded man's eyes were fixed on the bald man's injured leg. He was horrified. Of course, he recognized the necromancer's bone arrow. However, this bone arrow was too powerful. It actually crippled his leg. Was this still a bone arrow? Was this still a necromancer? When did these necromancers have such a cruel ability? The bearded man and the pale-faced man looked at each other, their faces full of shock. Whoosh! At this moment, a black shadow suddenly flew out from the dark. Its speed was unparalleled. Be careful! The two men were inexplicably frightened and quickly dodged. However, this black shadow's target was not them. Bang! The bald man's head on the ground exploded. His brain matter splattered all over the ground. A bone spear suddenly appeared in front of the two men. The body of the spear was still trembling. He's dead. The two men's faces were full of disbelief. They had not even seen the enemy, but one of their own was already dead. A gloomy aura enveloped the two men. The bearded man and the pale-faced man stood back to back at the same time. They held their weapons in front of them. At this moment, the pale-faced man said loudly, "May I know which senior has graced us with his presence? We are from the Holy See. We have no intention of offending your territory or provoking your dignity. Please be magnanimous and let us go." The pale-faced man's brain worked fast. His words were watertight. First, he pointed out his identity and used the name of the Holy See to pressure the other party. If the other party continued to push, they would become enemies with the Holy See. Second, seeing that the other party was powerful, he did not intend to pursue the matter of his teammate's death. He wanted to save his own life first. The two men held their breath. They did not dare to breathe too loudly. Snowflakes were falling from the sky and the ground was quiet. Puff, puff, a clear voice came from the dense forest. A figure slowly walked out of the snow. This person was wearing animal skin. His hair was messy. He was riding on the back of a skeleton warrior and was staring at them coldly. The bearded man's pupils shrank. He said in surprise, "Skeleton, you are." Chapter 33. The pale-faced man's pupils shrank. "It's you." Ron smiled, but didn't reply. Beside him, Big Beard said flatly, "Impossible, how can a necromancer be so powerful?" Such powerful and terrifying magic didn't fit the image of the necromancers in the Noah continent. They didn't dare to accept this reality. Believe it or not. Ron curled his lips in disdain. Hee, as I expected, you didn't die. Great, I can avenge my brother Groot. A cruel smile appeared on the pale-faced man's face. I'll beat you down, but don't worry, I won't kill you. I'll cut off your flesh piece by piece, making you beg for death. When you're on your last breath, I'll bring you back to the Holy Cathedral. Do you think you still have that chance? Ron sneered, arrogantly saying. The pale-faced man sneered, pulling out a sword from his space bag. Traces of fighting aura appeared, and he turned to Big Beard. Leave this person to me. Big Beard looked at Baldy's miserable state, and a bad feeling rose in his heart, but he still nodded. Come, didn't you want to kill me? Bring it on. Ron laughed, and at the same time raised his hand, and the black mist in his hand drifted away. At this moment, the 6 large snowballs around the 2 guards of the church suddenly moved. The snow on their bodies fell off, revealing a strange human figure within. Skeletons. The snowballs exploded, revealing 6 white skeletons. These skeletons held one-handed axes in one hand, and a large shield in the other. Their green eyes were fixed on the 2 guards. What? There are skeletons here? The pale-faced man was secretly shocked. Ron had been watching them for a long time, and had set up an ambush here in advance. Humph, you think these useless skeletons are enough to deal with me? Let me tell you, kid, in front of a true powerhouse, these tricks are useless. Go, kill him for me. Ron ignored the pale-faced man, and instead ordered the skeleton warriors. The skeleton warriors obeyed, and swarmed towards the pale-faced man. Go to hell. The pale-faced man's eyes were bloodshot. However, as soon as he came into contact with the skeleton warriors, he knew that they were far more powerful than he had imagined. Just by looking at their abnormal defense, he knew that they wouldn't be easy to deal with, not to mention that there were so many of them. Boom, boom, boom. In the snow, the battle was extremely fierce. Under the siege of the skeleton warriors, the 56 combat aura library quickly fell into a bitter battle. The more the pale-faced man fought, the more frightened he became. This was completely different from the necromancers he had seen in the Luolan Empire. He needed to spend a lot of effort to defeat a skeleton. What made him even more depressed was that every time he chopped down a skeleton, the child would just wave his hand and those broken skeletons would stagger back up. Skeletons TS. The pale-faced man suddenly discovered that the two of them were surrounded by skeletons, and the number of skeletons had unknowingly increased to 8. The bearded man's calves were also trembling. His extremely valiant beard was also trembling. He said with a trembling voice, "No. Impossible. This isn't a necromancer. Definitely not. Hurry. Hurry and help me." At this time, the pale-faced man no longer cared about his dignity, and loudly shouted, Don't fight. Let's run." The bearded man's teeth were chattering. He didn't think that a junior swordsman like him would think of running when facing a necromancer. Just as the pale-faced man was tangling with the skeleton warriors, a black bone spear appeared in Ron's hand. Bang! The pale-faced man looked at his chest in disbelief. He didn't know when a long black bone spear had appeared in his chest, but it had pierced through his body. The pale-faced man powerlessly fell to the ground, his face full of resentment and unwillingness. His eyes were fixed on Ron. Even in death, he didn't think that he would die in the hands of a necromancer. In the end, his eyes widened and he breathed his last. The people of Manor Naka, even death can't wipe out their crimes. Ron fiercely spat on the corpse. Then he raised his head and stared at the last bearded man, his dark eyes filled with killing intent. "You don't come over." The bearded man's face was full of panic. He looked at Ron as if he was looking at a devil. Plop! The bearded man actually knelt down. "Sir, please let me go. I have an 80-year-old mother." The bearded man begged for mercy with tears and snot. He was only 15. No, 16 years old youth. His heroic appearance couldn't hide his weakness. His strength was below that of the pale-faced man. Now that the pale-faced man was dead, he was even less of a match for Ron. "You can go." After a long silence, Ron suddenly spat out a sentence. "Thank you." "Thank you, sir." The bearded man felt as if he had been pardoned. He thanked him and then slowly retreated. As he retreated, he was on guard against Ron, afraid that he would sneak up on him from behind. Huff! Ron sighed deeply. The white breath he exhaled immediately condensed into ice crystals. To be honest, he didn't like to kill people. Although it wasn't the first time, the bearded man had said something fair for him, so he let him go. However, he also knew the consequences of letting him go. But Ron didn't care. He had a grudge with the Holy See. As long as he practiced necromancy, it meant that he was an enemy of the Holy See. There were some things that once done, there was no chance to regret. Moreover, Ron didn't regret it. What's this? Ron squatted down and picked up a yellow bag from the ground. He turned it over and over to examine it. He saw that the bag was yellow in color and the size of a palm. The four sides of the bag were engraved with traces of mysterious runes. Could this be the legendary space bag? Ron was surprised and delighted. He had heard of the space bag many times, but this was the first time he had seen it with his own eyes. Many mercenaries and adventurers carried this thing with them. Other than weapons, there were also many treasures that they had plundered. It could be said that obtaining this space bag was equivalent to obtaining all of the person's belongings. From the outside, the space bag didn't look big. However, the space bag was connected to another strange space. It could store things bigger than the bag itself. For example, the one that Ron had just picked up had a space of 3 cubic meters that could store things. Let's open it and see what's inside? Ron thought as he opened the bag. The items inside rolled out one by one. There were dozens of gold coins, clothes, food, firewood, and even tents. These were all necessities for survival in the wild. It was normal for these guards of the Holy See to carry them with them. Every one of these space bags was worth a fortune. The Holy See had one for each person, so they were considered wealthy. Ron flipped through the other space bags. The items inside were more or less the same. When he flipped through the pale-faced man's space bag, Ron unexpectedly found a few pieces of women's underwear. It seemed that this guy was a playboy. He couldn't help but give the pale-faced man's corpse a disdainful look. At this moment, Ron reached out and picked up the pale-faced man's longsword. The longsword was flowing with light, revealing a faint green glow. Good sword, Ron couldn't help but praise. Even if he didn't know the value of the sword, he could still feel the slight chill on the sword. If he knew the value of the sword, he would be able to tell that it was a low-grade celestial blue longsword. It was worth at least 1,000 gold coins. It could be said that it was the most valuable item on the pale-faced man's body. Ron held the sword on the ground and waved it a few times symbolically. He sighed and said, "It's a good sword. It's a pity that I don't know how to use a sword. I wonder what kind of weapon a necromancer uses?" Such a thought flashed through Ron's mind. At this moment, he remembered that he was empty-handed. Everyone else had a weapon but he didn't. Could it be that it's related to a pornographic novel? A mage uses a magic staff? If I have the chance, I'll have to ask Grandpa Homelin, Ron thought as he put away the spoils of war on the ground. These were all things that he deserved. Although he couldn't use them, he could sell them if he had the chance. These were all money. The cold wind whistled and snowflakes danced in the air. The world was covered in a vast expanse of white. In the snow, a few people wearing thick cotton clothes and armor were walking on the snow, leaving deep footprints. They seemed to be searching for something. Puff, all of a sudden, a black figure flew into the air and flew straight into the sky. Careful, several people were shocked. At the same time, a bright light appeared in their space bags and weapons instantly appeared in their hand. It was a false alarm. So it was just a bird. After seeing the black shadow in the sky clearly, everyone breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. They were soldiers of the Holy Sea's army. Compared to those useless Holy See guards, they were stronger. Every one of them was at the level of a beginner swordsman. Among them, there were also priests who specialized in healing. One of them wiped his sweat and said, "That scared me. I thought it was an enemy." Another smiled and said, "Enemy? Where did the enemy come from? This is the Dark Forest, the territory of the Holy See. The scariest thing in the Dark Forest isn't the enemy, but the strange beasts. If we encounter them, we must be careful, strange beasts. Maybe we can get some essence cores." "If that's true, then we'll be rich," one of them said with a smile. A smile appeared on the face of the middle-aged man in the lead. "Generally speaking, it's impossible for strange beasts to appear in this place. If there really is one, then you're on your own." Everyone laughed lightheartedly. However, the middle-aged man in the lead was silent for a moment and muttered, "Strange, it's winter now. Why would there be a bird?" At this moment, a black figure suddenly flew out. The middle-aged man in the lead stared with his eyes wide open. The black figure became bigger and bigger in his eyes. Screech, the long-boned spear pierced the middle-aged man in the lead and directly pierced through his brain. The middle-aged man died on the spot. "No, there's an enemy," these people reacted quickly. Before the middle-aged man's corpse fell, they all shouted and pulled out their weapons from their space bags. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, bone spears shot out from the dark like arrows. They were aimed at the bodies of these people, and went straight for their vitals. A soldier of the Holy See clutched his chest, and fell down unwillingly. He didn't even see who ambushed them until he died. The bone spears attacked mercilessly, and the soldiers fell one after another. Some of them didn't even have time to use their fighting aura. It was as if the ambushers had been prepared for this. Every corner had been carefully calculated. Even when they were hiding in a secluded place, a powerful bone spear would suddenly appear. Chapter 34. The hell-like rain of bone spears and arrows finally stopped. Only a caw-caw sound was heard, and a person walked out from the shadows. He was wearing a thick cloak that covered most of his face. The long cloak was blown by the wind and snow, making a whistling sound. A pair of black eyes flashed with a bright light, appearing extremely dazzling against the white snow between heaven and earth. The strangest thing was that this person was not walking on his own, but riding on the back of a skeleton. The skeleton walked like the wind, and its speed was very fast. One of the Holy Sea Guards had his shoulder blade pierced by a bone spear, but he was still breathing. He struggled to raise his head and open his eyes, trying to see the figure that appeared in front of him. "You? Who are you?" the soldier asked weakly. He wanted to know the reason why he died. The black figure did not answer. He only raised his hand in the air, and a black fog surrounded his hand. Not long after, a white bone spear appeared in this person's hand. The soldier's eyes were filled with despair. At this time, he heard a very soft voice. "I am the necromancer you are looking for, Ron." After saying that, the spear in his hand fell, and directly penetrated the soldier's chest. A crisp sound was heard, and the blood under the soldier's body dyed the snow-white ground red. The soldier's eyes widened, and there was a look of disbelief in his eyes. He pointed at Ron and said the last words of his life. "No. Impossible. Necromancers aren't as strong as you." After saying that, the soldier's head tilted, and he died. "Is that so? I'm not a necromancer?" Ron murmured, and there was a thoughtful expression on his face. "Why do they all say that? Could it be that they have seen a different necromancer than me?" After thinking for a while, Ron could not think of anything. He could only shake his head. "Forget it, let's not think about this. We have to leave here first. It would be bad if the Holy Sea came." He neatly picked up the spoils on the ground, and then quickly disappeared into the vast snow. The snow fluttered down, and the bodies on the snow were gradually buried. Golden Flash Town, Holy Cathedral. In the training field behind the cathedral, there was a series of roaring sounds. The Aryan priest was fighting with a heavily armored young man in white clothes. The two of them were exchanging blows, and the fight was particularly intense. Bursts of white light were released, as dazzling as the sun. The powerful attack caused the ground to tremble slightly. The white-clothed youth was the main attacker, while the Aryan priest was the main defender. One of them attacked fiercely, while the other defended steadily. They were evenly matched. The ground of the training field had already cracked, and there were shattered rocks everywhere. There were a few people who looked like attendants watching nervously, whispering from time to time. The heavily armored young man in white held a two-handed sledgehammer in his hand. Judging from the size of the sledgehammer, it was definitely not light. Probably weighed more than 50 kilograms. However, in the hands of the young man in white, it was as if it was nothing. With a swing of the sledgehammer, the ground immediately bloomed. The Aryan priest held a white scepter in one hand and a sturdy shield in the other. Under the attack of the white-clothed youth, he was forced to retreat. "Watch out, critical hammer!" the white-clothed youth shouted and leaped high. He used all his strength and concentrated all his holy power into the sledgehammer in his hand. The sledgehammer emitted a strong white light, and a powerful holy power was unparalleled. Seeing this scene, the Aryan priest did not hide anymore. If he was not careful, he would be injured by this move. "Word of truth, shield," The Aryan priest raised his white scepter, and 4 transparent shields suddenly appeared beside the Aryan priest. They protected the front, back, left, and right of the Aryan priest. It was simply impenetrable. Boom! The heavy hammers in his hands smashed onto the void shields summoned by the Aryan priest, emitting a dazzling holy light. The entire training field seemed to have been shaken, and a strong airflow spread out. The surrounding attendants were a little unstable. "What a terrifying attack!" one of the attendants said with lingering fear. "Sir Guderian's strength has increased again," another attendant said. "However, the Aryan priest is still a little stronger. Of course, the Aryan priest has the strength of a master," one of the attendants said proudly. When the attendants next to him were discussing, the Aryan priest stopped. He raised his scepter and waved it. He smiled and said, Okay, let's stop fighting." The youth named Guderian also stopped when he heard this, and a victorious smile appeared on his face. Guderian was a paladin. He was good at using sledgehammers and had tyrannical strength. This time, he came to Gold's Higher Town to spar with the Aryan priest. Guderian also had another identity, and that was the Holy Son of the Holy See. The Holy See would not let a trash become the Holy Son. Those who could become the Holy Son were all geniuses. Guderian entered the Holy See when he was 12 years old. In just 10 years, he had reached the peak of the paladin profession, an advanced paladin. At this time, he was only 22 years old. If he went one step further, he would reach the master level, which was the glorious paladin. His future was limitless. Facing the Holy Son Guderian, the Aryan priest did not dare to treat him lightly. The Holy Son had a very high status in the Holy See. Everyone had to be respectful to him. This was the rule. Sir Guderian's martial arts have improved again. It seems that the day of you becoming a glorious paladin is not far away. Aryan smiled and said flatteringly. Besides being the Holy Son, Guderian was also favored by the Pope. Humph. Of course. Facing the flattery of the Aryan priest, Guderian was full of disdain. His face showed an extremely arrogant expression. What is a glorious paladin? In time, I, Guderian, will reach an unprecedented height. With my talent, it is not impossible for me to become a glorious paladin or even a holy paladin. You know, I am only 22 years old. Guderian was very confident in his age and strength. He did not put the Aryan priest in his eyes at all. The Aryan priest was in his 40s and only had the strength of a master level. He was too weak. The ranks of paladins were divided into trainee paladin, paladin, glorious paladin, glorious paladin, glorious paladin, holy paladin. Among them, the glorious paladin was a master level, the glorious paladin was a master level, and the holy paladin was a legendary powerhouse of the sacred domain. As for the trainee paladin and holy paladin, one was a trainee level, and the other was a soldier level. Each level was divided into 3 ranks. For example, the paladin was divided into beginner paladin, intermediate paladin, and advanced paladin. The master level and the master level were also divided into the sacred domain. Humph, boasting shamelessly. The Aryan priest heard this and scolded in his heart. This guy is too arrogant. Does he really think that becoming a glorious paladin is so easy? The Aryan priest was a Guangming priest, which was also a master level. His strength was obtained through many trials and tribulations. Guderian was very young and did not know the severity of the situation. Although his strength was already an advanced paladin and did not seem to be too far away from becoming a master level, in reality, the difference between a knight level and a master level was like heaven and earth. It was not an easy matter. Although the Aryan priest scolded in his heart, he did not show any disrespect on his face. He knew that the current Pope, Ernst, thought highly of him. He smiled and said, "Of course. With Sir Guderian's age, his future is limitless. it is not difficult for him to become a master level. Guderian smiled proudly. Arian, your strength is not bad. You can actually withstand my attacks for so long. Otherwise you would have to use your healing skills. When the Aryan priest heard this, he was so angry that he almost jumped up. This kid was too arrogant. He could not even tell that he had been holding back. Although your strength is not bad, it is easy for me to kill you. If it were not for His Majesty the Pope, I would have already beaten you to the ground. Do you really think that you are invincible? The gap between a knight level and a master level was huge. It was not difficult for the Aryan priest to win. The Aryan priest's face twitched a few times and he forced a smile. Then, thank you, holy son Guderian, for being merciful, Guderian waved his hand generously. He narrowed his eyes and said, Aryan, I think you are a good person. If I take up an important position, I will definitely promote you. The Holy Son had a special position in the Holy See. He would definitely be put in an important position by the Holy See. The Holy See had more than one Holy Son and Holy Daughter, but there were very few of them. The Aryan priest smiled with difficulty. Then, thank you, Holy Son. As Aryan spoke, he sighed at the ruthlessness of the world. Guderian was originally the child of a poor civilian. He was the third child in his family. He was one of the virgin boys and girls that Guderian personally chose to send to the Holy See. Guderian also did not disappoint. Not only did he become a candidate for the position of Holy Son, but he also became the Holy Son. At that time, Guderian was very polite to the Aryan priest. He kept calling him Father, unlike now, where he called him by his name. Pornographic novels, it seemed that when people climbed to a high position, they were used to flattery. It was easy for them to become arrogant and conceited. Guderian was such an example. After becoming the Holy Son, Guderian's attitude towards his guide and mentor, the Aryan priest, also became extremely disrespectful. It was as if he was scolding his own subordinates, bossing them around. From the moment he came to Gold's Higher Town, the Aryan priest, who was originally very happy, became extremely unhappy. Coupled with Guderian's arrogance, he became more and more depressed. However, the Aryan priest still knew his limit. This time, Guderian came to Gold's Higher Town because of His Majesty, the Pope. This time, he was fully in charge of this operation. To put it bluntly, he was here to steal the credit. Necromancers had a special meaning to the Holy See. It was extremely rare to find a necromancer in the Holy Roman Empire. This credit could not be said to be small. If this matter was done well, Guderian was very likely to rely on this matter to rise to a higher position, or even hold an important position. Saying that he would report to the Holy See could only deceive idiots like Gerald. The Aryan priest would not do such a thing. After learning from Big Beard that Ron was a necromancer, Aryan was so excited that he could not sleep for several days and nights. He thought that this credit should be his alone. He immediately sent his subordinates, which were the Holy See's guards, to capture Ron. Through some clues, he learned that Ron ran to the dark forest. Aryan did not stop to rest and led people to search for him. However, at this time, the weather was already winter. The cold wind was blowing and snowflakes were flying. How could the Aryan priest, who lived like a prince, endure such hardships? The Aryan priest searched for a few days without any results. He gradually lost his patience and had to find an excuse to go home and warm himself. Also, he did not believe that Ron could survive in such a harsh environment like the dark forest. Perhaps he was already dead. However, it was a pity to give up this credit. He could only order the Holy See's guards to continue the search, making the Holy See's guards suffer. However, what made him depressed was that the Holy See's guards who entered the dark forest disappeared for unknown reasons. Now that the snow had sealed the mountain, there was no way to find the bodies. What was worse was that this matter was somehow spread to the top. The Pope was furious and sent Guderian to Gold's higher town to take charge of the mission to capture the heretic. Chapter 35. Guderian took the towel from the attendant and wiped his sweat. He then threw the towel away and left. Father Arian could only follow him quickly. Leaving the training field, Guderian walked on the white flagstone path with his hands behind his back and said slowly, "Arian, is it true about that necromancer?" Arian nodded and said, "It's true. One of my men saw him. I don't remember his name, but he had a big beard. It was this man who saw it with his own eyes." Arian paused and continued, "According to him, those Holy See guards were also killed by Ron. But it's not clear why Ron let him go." Guderian said, "Oh, how long has it been since a necromancer appeared in the Holy Roman Empire? It's been a few hundred years. I've seen necromancers before. They're just trash. Now that the Holy See is making such a big fuss about it, it's nothing more than this necromancer appearing at the wrong time and place. It's really challenging the Holy See's dignity." For the Holy See, who had always been known for their holiness, the appearance of a heretic in their own country was no different from a slap to their face. The Pope had no choice but to take this seriously. Arian frowned and said, "Guderian, aren't you surprised by the necromancer's strength?" "The necromancer's strength?" Guderian stopped and turned around to look at Arian. "What are you suspecting?" Arian took a deep breath. "According to my men who escaped, the 2 guards of the Holy See who were with him were killed in just a few rounds." He looked at Guderian. "My 2 men have the strength of a beginner swordsman." "Beginner swordsman?" Guderian frowned. "You mean that the necromancer has the strength of a beginner warrior?" Arian nodded. Guderian shook his head. "Impossible. The reputation of the necromancer being trash had long spread throughout the Noah continent. Guderian had also heard of it. But this is the truth," Arian said. Guderian's eyes narrowed and his brows relaxed. "You mean, he will be, I suspect that he is an ancient necromancer. Guderian, don't forget the scrolls we read in the library of the Holy See's holy capital, Mount Hygel. There are records of ancient necromancers in those scrolls." Arian said solemnly. The headquarters of the Holy See was located in Mount Hygel, the holy capital of the Holy See. There was a secret library there that stored the rich collection of books that the Holy See had plundered over countless years. It was not open to the public, and some of the secret books could only be read by the important figures of the Holy See. As the Holy Son, Guderian must have read these things as well. "You mean those scrolls that are almost torn apart?" Guderian shook his head in disdain. "Those are just legends. Maybe it's not a legend," Arian said with certainty. "He's an ancient necromancer. I can't be wrong." Guderian lowered his head and thought for a moment. His eyes shone with joy. "Necromancy novels. I've also read about necromancers in the Roman Empire. They are indeed vulnerable. If those beginner swordsmen were really killed by that necromancer called Ron, then he might really be the legendary ancient necromancer." Catching a necromancer was already enough for Guderian to gain a foothold in the Holy See. If he caught an ancient necromancer, a smile appeared on Guderian's face. This trip to Gold's higher town was really worth it. "Guderian, I'm just reminding you that the opponent is an ancient necromancer. Don't let your guard down," Arian said with a smile. "How about this? I'll join the search team and catch him together." Father Arian finally revealed his purpose. Guderian's smile froze, and a trace of dissatisfaction appeared on his face. Father Arian's words were said with good intentions, but in fact, he wanted to take the credit. If he joined the search team and caught the ancient necromancer in the end, he would have nothing to do with it. Guderian said with a straight face. "Arian, as a priest, spreading the glory of God Guangming for the Holy See is more important. There's no need to trouble you with such a small matter. Just leave it to me. Arian's smile disappeared. Guderian wanted to kick him out of this matter. He opened his mouth to speak, but was interrupted by Guderian. It's settled then. Guderian did not want to be entangled in this matter, so he hurriedly turned and left. What an arrogant kid! I'll let you know my power sooner or later. Looking at Guderian's back, Father Arian was so angry that his teeth itched. However, he had no other choice. This operation was under the command of Holy Son Guderian. If he acted alone, the consequences were clear. 1, 2, 3. 32. In an inconspicuous cave, Ron was eating delicious dry food while excitedly counting the space bags he had obtained. Each space bag represented the life of a Holy See soldier. Since the Holy See sent elite soldiers into the dark forest to search for him, Ron would not sit still and wait for death. After surviving in the dark forest for so long, he had long understood the principle of the law of the jungle. There was a lot of money, weapons, equipment, clothes, dry food, and many other good things in the space bag. Ron would not let go of these things, and equipped himself with everything that could be used. The current Ron was wearing leather armor and an overcoat that wrapped around his thin body. The overcoat was very large, and it did not fit him well. His messy hair was casually draped behind his head, and it was much better than his savage image from before. When Ron was full, he put the rest of the dry food into the space bag. With a whoosh, the things in his hand disappeared. Ron smiled with satisfaction and said to himself, "It's so convenient to have a space bag. I can put anything in it except for the space bag." It was common knowledge in this world that space bags could not be placed inside, but Ron himself did not know it. As he hung the space bags on his body, Ron suddenly heard a wolf howl. That's it? That exotic beast? Ron quickly recognized it. It was the exotic beast that had chased him until he had nowhere to go. He wanted to take revenge after he advanced, but it escaped. "Humph, I won't let you escape this time," Ron sneered. He lowered his head, turned around, and walked out of the door. Not long after, Ron found the location of the exotic beast by following the source of the sound. However, when he arrived at the destination, he was shocked by the scene he saw. There were actually 3 exotic beasts in front of him. 2 of them were black, and 1 was white. There was also a granny with white hair sitting next to them. Ron took a closer look. It turned out that 2 black wolves were attacking a white wolf. One of the black wolves was one of the exotic beasts that he had chased away. It was missing an ear, which was Ron's masterpiece. He did not expect it to have another helper now. Large amounts of flames emerged from the 2 huge black wolves. They looked like 2 fire wolves, and fireballs, bullets, and pillars were thrown at the white wolf as if they were free. Compared to the 2 giant black wolves, the white wolf was much smaller. Its body was covered with white ice crystals, and it looked like an ice shield protecting itself. However, it looked like it was having a hard time and was at a disadvantage. What's going on? Exotic beasts are also fighting with other exotic beasts? Killing each other? Ron was scratching his head in confusion. At this time, the white wolf spoke. Her voice sounded a little anxious. "Human, quickly come and help me. I'll thank you." "What?" Ron was obviously taken aback. He cried out involuntarily, "Did I hear wrong? Exotic beasts can actually talk?" Hearing these words, the small white wolf almost staggered and fell to the ground. She climbed up in annoyance and spat out 2 icicles from her mouth, forcing the 2 huge black wolves to retreat. She turned around and stretched out her sharp claws. She fiercely said to Ron, "Hateful human, this young miss is not an exotic beast. Don't compare me with these lunatics." This exotic beast was actually a woman? Ron felt that talking to a wolf was very funny. He thought for a moment and asked, "Then, what are you?" "Nonsense, are you blind? Of course this young miss is a magical beast," that little white wolf said angrily, This young miss is a noble race within the magical beast clan. You despicable human, could it be that you have never seen a magical beast before? Ron was sweating in his heart. This was indeed the first time he saw a magical beast. It was also the first time he knew that a magical beast could talk. That little white wolf got distracted as soon as she spoke, and was in a precarious situation because of the two giant wolves. She cried out in alarm as she retreated. At the same time, she shouted, "Damned humans, why aren't you helping me? Young man, help her. I think she can't hold on much longer." The old granny sitting next to her said with a smile. She didn't seem to be worried about the small white wolf's life or death at all. Okay, Ron nodded. Even if the old granny didn't say anything, seeing a wolf that could talk, he would also lend a helping hand. Moreover, one of the two black wolves was his enemy. No, vengeful wolf, Ron chanted an incantation. Black fog coiled around his fingers. Not long after, 5 skeleton warriors scrambled to crawl out from the ground. Their eyes flashed with a faint green light. They were wearing heavy armor and holding a huge shield in one hand and a heavy axe in the other. They were constantly roaring. "What is this?" The small white wolf was shocked. From the human's attire, he was wearing leather armor. He was clearly a ranger or a thief. But he summoned human skeletons. What was he doing? What a powerful evil energy! The old granny saw the skeleton warriors that Ron summoned. She was startled at first, but then her relaxed expression was replaced by a trace of seriousness. Chapter 36. The two wolves also discovered Ron. The one missing an ear growled and pounced at Ron. Pornographic novel, its blood-red eyes burned with madness. Ron coldly snorted. "You escaped last time. You still haven't learned your lesson? Go, skeleton warrior. Chop these bastards into pieces for me." Ron waved his arms, and a faint black aura twined around his hands. The skeleton warrior seemed to have heard its superior's command and fearlessly charged forward. Huff! Huff! A few fireballs flew out of the wolf's mouth and headed straight for the skeleton warrior. The skeleton warrior wasn't afraid and raised its shield to block the fireballs. The fireballs exploded inside the giant shield, and the skeleton warrior was forced back a few steps. However, it shook its head and stood up again, unharmed. However, one of the fireballs changed direction midway and flew towards Ron. "Careful!" Xiaobai cried out. She had tasted this fireball before, and it was very unpleasant. Even with a frost shield, she was still covered in cuts and bruises. Bone shield. Ron was not in a hurry. As he chanted an incantation, a bone shield suddenly appeared in front of him. The fireball hit the bone shield and exploded. The blazing fire element almost singed Ron's hair. Cough! Cough! Ron choked on the black smoke and coughed awkwardly. Xiao Bai's heart was in her throat, but when she saw Ron escape danger, she let out a sigh of relief. Then, when she saw his embarrassed expression, she couldn't help but giggle. "Although I don't know what this is, but it looks like it's very powerful." Looking at the valiant skeleton hero, little white wolf praised from the bottom of his heart. At the same time, he cast a look of appreciation at Ron. Being teased by a female wolf, Ron's face burned. He steeled his heart and summoned 2 more skeleton warriors. At the same time, he cast skeleton haste on them. 7 skeleton warriors was already the limit of what Ron could summon. The 2 giant black wolves were beginning to falter. On the other hand, the pressure on little white wolf's side was greatly reduced. She became spirited and revealed her white teeth. With a stomp of her front paw, an icicle spread out. The 2 black wolves were injured and their movements were greatly restricted. A sinister look appeared in Ron's eyes. "The game is over. Go to hell, bone prison." 2 skeletal cages suddenly rose into the air and trapped the 2 giant wolves. Little White Wolf cried out in surprise and was immediately overjoyed. Victory was in sight. Bone's spear, with a thought, Ron took out a black bone spear and spun it in his palm. The bone spear shot out like an arrow and killed one of the howling giant black wolves. The giant black wolf howled and fell. Ron turned his head and saw that the other giant black wolf had also died at the hands of the petite little white wolf. Don't be fooled by little white wolf's petite and cute appearance. She was extremely ruthless. Her sharp wolf claws smashed the trapped giant black wolf's head into pieces. Brain matter scattered all over the ground. The battle was over. Ron and Little White Wolf looked at each other and let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the giant black wolf's corpse, Ron unwillingly curled his lips. Good fellow, so cruel to his own kind. Little White Wolf originally wanted to thank him, but hearing this, her eyebrows shot up. Who's the same kind as these lunatics? I think you're the same kind as him. Your whole family is the same kind. Ugh! Ron was fiercely reprimanded by Little White Wolf and helplessly shook his head. Magical beasts and strange beasts were really different. Strange beasts looked crazy and didn't know how to speak. This magical beast, if not for the fact that it had the form of a wolf, just based on its personality, it was similar to a human. When Little White Wolf was angry, she was coquettish and looked incomparably cute. Adding on the thick fur on her body, which was as smooth as satin, her bright eyes revealed an innocent look. Adding on her fluffy tail, which kept swinging, she looked very lovable. You're so beautiful, Ron praised from the bottom of his heart. Little White Wolf's face couldn't help but turn red as an embarrassed expression appeared on her face. This expression appeared on a wolf's face, causing Ron to be startled. Your fur is so white, I'll call you Little White from now on. Ron paused and said with a smile, I used to raise a dog, also called Little White, but its fur wasn't as beautiful as yours. As Ron spoke, he didn't notice Little White Wolf's angry expression. Ouch! Bite me! Before Ron could finish his words, Little White Wolf pounced on him and fiercely bit him, causing him to grit his teeth in pain. Little White Wolf's mouth was merciful. If it really bit him, it would probably tear off a piece of flesh. Ai. D-Lin, how can you bite people? No matter what, this gentleman is our savior. You should be thanking him. At this time, that old granny walked over shakily. Her tone was filled with blame. This old granny's hair was already gray, her face was covered with wrinkles, she held something like a crutch in her hand, her body was dressed in ordinary linen clothes, and the smile on her face was full of kindness. Humph! Who told him to bully me? That Little White Wolf called D-Lin pouted her small mouth, revealing a row of eerie white teeth, her mouth said with dissatisfaction. Thinking that this guy treated her like a puppy, D-Lin felt a burst of anger. The old granny smiled kindly, looked at Ron and said, This young man has a good heart, he probably didn't do it on purpose. I think this young man has always lived in the mountains. He doesn't know much about the outside world, right? Yes. Ron respectfully bowed. I grew up in Maple Leaf Town, and then came to this dark forest. I really haven't seen much of the world. Please don't blame me. Ron also knew that he made a mistake, he honestly replied. Haha, it doesn't matter. The old granny replied with a smile, looking up and down Ron. Her eyes showed a very satisfied look. Little White Wolf's face eased a little, she glanced at Ron, snorted and turned her head away. D-Lin, quickly transform into a human form, and thank this benefactor. The old granny ordered. Humph! Little White Wolf snorted with dissatisfaction. At this time, her body emitted a white light. The white light was so dazzling that Ron couldn't open his eyes. Ron covered his face with his hands, vaguely. The giant wolf in his eyes stood up and turned into a woman's figure. When the light dissipated, Ron's eyes returned to normal. He was suddenly stunned. What appeared in front of him was a petite and exquisite beauty, with big black eyes, long fluttering fur, and long white hair hanging down to her waist. She was wearing very thin clothes, with a few brown things wrapped around her delicate breasts, revealing her small and lovely navel. Her lower body was wearing a black leather skirt, revealing her snow-white slender thighs, and a pair of boots with a circle of small fluff on her feet. Ron was stunned. This doll-like beauty in front of him, was she the little white wolf just now? "Grandma, look, that guy is looking at me." Lin blushed under Ron's gaze. She quickly ran to the old granny's side, supported her, and acted like a spoiled child. "Silly child, I have eyes, can't I look at you?" The old granny kindly smiled, turned to Ron and said, I still don't know the name of this benefactor." "My name is Ron." Hee, Ron, don't be nervous. Although we are magical beasts, we have no malice towards humans." The old granny smiled and said, "I see that your attack style is quite strange, different from any profession in the Noah continent. I wonder what profession Mr. Ron is?" I am a necromancer. I practice necromancy magic," Ron honestly replied. "Necromancer?" the old granny exclaimed, and then she shook her head. "I haven't set foot on human land for a long time. I didn't expect the ancient profession of necromancer to still exist." Ron asked in amazement, "Granny, could it be you are also not human?" "That's right." The old granny nodded and said, "I am also a magical beast, the prophet of the magical beast empire's Thousand Illusion Ice Wolf clan. My name is Tarora." She pointed to the little beauty beside her. "She is the young miss of the Thousand Illusion Ice Wolf clan. Lin, quickly thank Mr. Ron." "What's there to thank? If not for these two crimson fire wolves, I alone would be more than enough to deal with them." She pointed at Ron and said in a dissatisfied tone, "Since he didn't help, I wouldn't have lost. Quickly thank him." The old granny's face turned serious, her voice was full of sternness. Thank you, Mr. Ron, for saving my life." Seeing her granny angry, Lin could only reluctantly bow, and then stood to the side, looking at Ron angrily. "Magical Beast Empire? Magical Beast Empire? Then wouldn't all the citizens of the Empire be magical beasts?" Ron exclaimed. The outside world was too inconceivable to him. Until now he only knew of the Holy Roman Empire and the Roland Empire. His world-view was a blank. Lin rolled her eyes, revealing a "you are an idiot" expression, and said, "Of course, our magical beast empire's territory is much larger than your human empire's. Among all the races in the Noah continent, you humans are the weakest." "Oh?" This was the first time Ron heard of it, and felt that it was very refreshing, and immediately asked, "Then, on the Noah continent, what other races are there?" "Of course there are," Lin said without hesitation. "Other than us magical beasts and you humans, there are also beastmen, elves." Looking at Ron's attentive expression, Lin thought of how hateful that guy was, and pursed her lips. "I'm not telling you." Ron could only helplessly shake his head. It seemed that offending a woman would not end well. "Let's not talk about this. Child, you are a human, what are you doing in the dark forest?" Tarora pulled Ron's hand, her tone was affectionate, as if she was talking to her own grandson. Chapter 37. Without waiting for Ron to answer, Lin said, "Grandma, didn't you come to the dark forest to do something? Now let's go." Lin urged. She didn't want her grandma to have too much contact with this hateful human. This. Tarora hesitated and said to Ron, "Sorry, we do have something to do, so we have to leave." "Oh." Ron's eyes flashed with a trace of disappointment. He didn't expect the grandma and granddaughter to leave so soon. It seemed that they knew a lot of things. Ron was eager to know what the outside world was like. "All right then, you guys be careful." Since the other party had something to do, Ron didn't force them. It seemed that they didn't want him to follow, although he still had a lot of things to ask. Seeing Ron's disappointed expression, Lin's face showed a charming smile. She took out something from her arms and threw it on the ground. "For you, what's this?" Ron saw a few space bags thrown on the ground. "You helped us, so we naturally have to thank you. The things inside were obtained by killing a few humans when I was bored. I'll give them to you." After saying that, she didn't look at Ron and turned to support Taurora's hand. She smiled and said, "Grandma, let's go." "Oh, okay. Taurora agreed and was half pulled and half supported by her granddaughter. When she left, she looked back at Ron from time to time and waved to him. "So this is a magical beast. Interesting, it's almost the same as a human after transforming into a human," Ron said to himself after sending away the 2000 illusion ice wolf. He picked up a few space bags from the ground and used his spiritual sense to explore them. There were a lot of things inside. There were weapons, clothes, and armor. They were similar to those of ordinary adventurers. However, he found something strange. It was the holy angel statue. Ron couldn't help but curl his lips. "I thought it was something good. It turns out that you killed a few holy sea guards and then gave them away." After rummaging through the pouch, Ron took out an item. It was actually a magician's staff. "This is a mage's weapon." Ron's eyes blazed. This thing that he had been dreaming about had finally appeared in front of him. In the past, he had imagined himself wearing a mage's robe and holding a magic staff, looking like a great mage. If it was the Ron of the past, he would have been incomparably excited. But now, this feeling had faded a lot. Just as Homeland's grandfather said, undead magic wasn't inferior to magic, it was even stronger. While magic was still growing, undead magic had already dominated the entire continent. "I wonder if this staff will increase the attack power of my necromancy magic?" This thought suddenly flashed through Ron's mind. He had always been worried about his weapon. Give it a try. Ron held the idea of giving it a try. He held the magic staff in his hand and muttered an incantation. Not long after, a small bone spike appeared in his hand. Ron raised his head and stared at a small tree not far away that only had branches left. "Go!" Ron waved the magic staff in his hand and the bone spike flew out of his hand. With a purring sound, it firmly fixed itself on the tree and penetrated deep into it. "My strength has increased again, but this magic staff has no effect on me." Ron was a little discouraged. He put the magic staff back into the pouch and thought, "I wonder what weapon a necromancer like me uses? Or no weapon?" After thinking for a while, he still couldn't come up with an answer. At this moment, a gust of cold wind blew and Ron felt a chill. "Forget it, let's not think about it anymore. I'll go back and cultivate. Anyway, the matter here has been settled. Damn it, it's too cold here." He tightened his clothes and prepared to leave. Suddenly, he glanced at the two corpses of the crimson fire wolves from the corner of his eye. "I heard that magic beasts of the 4th level and above have essence cores. Let's see if they have such things." Ron thought to himself. He immediately acted. With a wave of his hand, a bone spike appeared in his hand and he walked towards the crimson fire wolf's corpse. The bone spike cut through the crimson fire wolf's hard skull without any resistance. Ron used the bone spike as a small knife. Not long after, the crimson fire wolf's head was cut open and a pitch-black object was revealed. "This is the essence core?" Ron held the essence core in his hand and carefully examined it, feeling the energy waves within. "Looks like I'm right. The energy waves are really strong. This is the most valuable thing in the entire beast." Ron happily put away the essence core. At the same time, he dissected the other crimson fire wolf and took out its essence core. Ron strung 10 spatial pouches together and hung them on his body. No matter what kind of pouch they were, he couldn't help but laugh when he saw his own appearance. The heavy snow covered the bloodstains as if nothing had happened. On the other side of the dark forest. "Grandma, it's here, right?" Lin supported Taurora to a small lake in the depths of the dark forest. Yes, it's here." Taurora's face was filled with excitement. Her lips trembled and she couldn't say a word. "Grandma, let me help you to sit here," Lin said softly. Taurora nodded her head. Taurora sat down on a rock by the lake. She looked at everything around her and sank into deep thought. Sometimes she frowned and sometimes she smiled. She even ignored her precious granddaughter to the side. After a while, Lin couldn't help but ask, "Grandma, you kept saying that you wanted to come to a certain place in the dark forest. Now that we're here, why aren't you saying anything?" Tarora sighed and said faintly, "Lin, do you know? This is the place where I met your grandfather. It's here." Lin widened her eyes. "Yes, it's here." Tarora fell into deep memories. "I stayed here with him for more than 3 months. Every day we sat here, enjoying the beautiful scenery by the lake, watching the sunrise and sunset. Now, the cold wind was whistling, the ground was snow-white, the surrounding branches were bare, and even the lakeside was frozen. There was no beautiful scenery at all, but Tarora was still mesmerized by it. Here were the beautiful memories of her first love as a young girl." "Oh." Lin nodded her head as if she didn't understand. "At that time, I had just gotten to know him. Who would have thought that this fellow, this old bastard, actually. Tarora couldn't continue speaking. Her aged face actually had a trace of a young girl's blush. She wanted to say that Lin's grandfather had done her here, but how could she say such a thing in front of her own granddaughter? Lin was a smart woman. She understood immediately, and a blush quietly appeared on her cheek. Tarora sighed faintly. Unfortunately, that old bastard actually passed away so early. Seeing this, Lin hurriedly comforted, "Grandma, don't worry. Grandfather will be watching us from the sky." Tarora said, "Actually, I've already gotten over it. As a prophet, this day would come sooner or later. It's already a miracle that I've lived for so long." Prophets were a kind of profession. Although they didn't have any battle prowess, they were very respected. For example, Tarora had an extremely high position in the tribe. Even the 1,000 Illusion Ice Wolf tribe's patriarch listened to her words without the slightest bit of disobedience. Lin turned pale with fright. Her heart flashed with a trace of unease. She opened her innocent eyes wide and looked at Tarora. "Grandma, don't tell me you—" Tarora surprisingly didn't hide it from her and nodded. "Yes, Grandma has already passed the time to write pornographic novels." Lin's eyes immediately turned red. She threw herself into her grandmother's arms. "Grandma, don't go. I don't want to leave you." Tarora tenderly stroked Lin's hair and sighed. "Actually, the one I'm most worried about is you," Lin softly sobbed. Tarora continued, "You lost your parents when you were young. I pitied you, so I brought you to live by my side. With my prestige, the people in the tribe will also respect you. If I die, I'm afraid you won't have it easy." Lin's tearful face emerged from Tarora's embrace. "Grandma, I'll take good care of myself." Tarora smiled. Lin, ever since you were young, you've always wanted to be strong. Ever since you were young, I've never worried about you in life. Actually, I'm most worried about one thing." Tarora sighed again. "Ever since you were born, I've noticed it. You know, among us magical beasts there are different grades. They are respectively high-grade magical beasts, mid-grade magical beasts, and low-grade magical beasts. Magical beasts don't need much cultivation to step on the path of the strong. They rely on talent. The higher the talent, the higher their future achievements. This is the difference between high-grade magical beasts and mid-grade magical beasts." Tarora continued, "In our kingdom of magical beasts, the 1,000 Illusion Ice Wolf, in terms of talent, is only a mid-grade magical beast. But you're different, Lin. Do you know that you were born with the bloodline of a high-grade magical beast, the moon-devouring heavenly wolf?" Lin was dumbfounded. She was speechless. "I also don't know why my ancestors' noble bloodline would appear in your body. Perhaps this is the so-called atavism phenomenon." Tarora sighed. "For a high-grade magical beast to appear in a mid-grade magical beast clan, it's reasonable to say that it's a matter worthy of celebration. But you know about the clan's matters. These uncles of yours aren't good people." Hearing this, Lin's eyes revealed a disgusted expression. The struggle for power within the 1,000 Illusion Ice Wolf clan had already reached the point of killing each other. She, who was by Taurora's side, had long since become accustomed to all of this. With Taurora's superior position within the Thousand Illusion Ice Wolf clan, Di Lin was able to avoid being drawn into the endless struggle. Taurora's breathing also became hurried. For your safety, I had no choice but to seek help from an old friend. I had him seal the power of your moon-devouring heavenly wolf. Di Lin nodded. Is it that old uncle from the imperial family? Taurora nodded. Yes, it's him. He owes me a favor, so he helped me. His true form is a poisoned scorpion lion, and he's also a member of the imperial family. If you have any trouble, you can look for him. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.